Chapter 983 In Your Name Pa. When the flicked gold coin landed in his palm, Klein didn't even see if it was heads or tails. This was because his mind was fixed on a particular scene. Amidst the woods, the clouds high in the sky failed to completely conceal the stars that dotted the black velvet sky. The humming, clicking and thrumming sounds of the insects spread far into the night, mixed with the two commotions of the two explosions inside Moose Manor. Klein rapidly used his knowledge from astromancy, and he roughly gauged the exact location of the scene. Then his body phased away, appearing beside a noonie before grabbing his shoulder. During this process, Klein collected the transparent maggots he had implanted in the rats and insects before severing the connection of the spirit body threads. In just 2 seconds, he vanished from Moose Manor, which was gradually turning chaotic and noisy, teleporting to the spot that he had seen in his mind. The area was identical to the revelation which Klein had received. It was extremely silent, to the point of being able to hear the breeze wafting through the leaves and trees. Illusory black threads, representing all the creatures with spirituality in the region, surfaced in Klein's vision. There were copious numbers of them, dozens being a gross understatement. To sift through them and determine which was the problematic one couldn't be accomplished in a short amount of time. However, he wasn't in a rush, because he had confirmed one thing. His divination results could be trusted as long as the Marauder Pathway demigod didn't possess any high-level items. After all, after becoming a Bizarro sorcerer, not only were his powers elevated, the Grey Fog's powers also seeped deeper into reality. With these two combined, it made his divination powers far more outstanding than most saints, even without heading above the Grey Fog. It was unlikely that he was weaker than a Beyonder of the Fate Pathway of the same sequence. In contrast, the Marauder Pathway demigod's condition was in shambles with its strength at an all-time low. Therefore, Klein believed that the demigod was hiding in the woods and hadn't fled far. Due to such reasons, he believed that waiting patiently was the best solution. The Marauder Pathway demigod was relatively weak, in an unstable condition, and close to losing control. After experiencing that intense battle and abandoning the rat's body, the situation only worsened. It was impossible to experience an improvement. Under such situations, if she didn't replenish herself or recover, it was only a matter of time before problems cropped up. Therefore, Klein could wait, while she couldn't. As the humming, clicking and thrumming sounds spread, Klein waited as he hurriedly converted marionettes. He made a noonie leave the region and hide about 1,000 meters away. Meanwhile, he kept note of the possibility of having his spirit body threads controlled, as he recalled that the enemy had stolen the Beyonder power from his marionette. Suddenly, he heard a sound that resembled the panting that came from deep within the soul. Right on the heels of that, a hysterical voice sounded from a tree diagonally ahead of him. "Why are you forcing me? Why are you forcing me? Why are you forcing me?" Amidst the sharp voice, the tree's outer bark rapidly peeled off, revealing the core wood beneath. And on it, holes cracked open as strange worms with about 8 circles around them crawled out. The transparent rings of these worms had many three-dimensional patterns as though time was swirling through them. Suddenly, Klein lost all his thoughts, losing the Beyonder powers of air cannon and paper figurine substitutes. He lost his belt, coat, and hat, making him appear like a sculpture of flesh. However, to a marionette, this wasn't too serious a problem. After all, it was no problem for his actual body. The lost powers could be retrieved by switching maggots. Yes, upon hearing the panting, Klein had swapped places with a noonie. And a winner like a noonie had no need to worry about his pants dropping after losing his belt. His waist swelled rapidly thanks to the powers of Faceless, stopping his pants from falling. New marionettes in the form of insects and rats crawled out and surrounded the mutated tree. At this moment, a voice with a hint of a smile sounded from an unknown location. "Calm down. Don't be angry. Everything will be resolved." The voice was filled with a persuasive force. The mutation of the tree slowed down as the ringed worms slowly shrank back in. "Is that so?" Inside the tree, the vicious-sounding voice calmed down. There was some level of blankness to the voice, as though it was about to be convinced. As for Klein, he found the words extremely reasonable. He couldn't help but reflect on the reason for pushing a demigod to the brink of losing control. He had a vague feeling that he had forgotten something and was unable to recall the true reason for coming then. He saw a chuckling figure walk out of the woods. "Relax. I have the means to stop you from losing control. All you need to do is to follow my instructions." The figure was wearing a black trench coat that resembled a robe. He matched it with black trousers and leather shoes. He had a broad forehead and a thin face. Wearing a tall hat and a striking crystal monocle, he appeared extremely refined. Klein's gaze froze as a word resonated through his mind. Amon. The person before him was Blasphemer, Angel of Time, King of Angels, the son of the Creator Amon. Although he knew that it was merely an avatar, Klein didn't waste any time. He immediately abided by the deepest cries of his heart and used creeping hunger to phase away. During this process, Enuni snapped his fingers and lit the matches in his pocket and fallen leaves a distance away, allowing him to appear beside Klein with flaming jump. Klein grabbed him and vanished with him. In the event that Amon tried to stop him, or if Enuni wasn't able to return fast enough, Klein's plan was to abandon his marionette and travel far away. Under such circumstances, the death of a marionette to ensure his survival was definitely worth it. Luckily, Amon's attention was placed on the peeling tree. He didn't stop him, or should it be said, it was the case that he didn't have the time to stop him. After Klein and his marionette vanished, Amon halted and turned to look at where the two were originally standing. As though in thought, he nodded slightly and scoffed. A bizarro sorcerer of Evernight. He then retracted his gaze and looked at the half-mutated tree and asked with a smile, "A descendant of Jacob? Why, yes. Do you know my ancestor?" Inside the tree, the rat demigod asked as though it had grabbed onto a floating board while drowning. Amon stroked his chin and nodded indiscernibly. Of course. They tasted excellent. Inside the tree, the descendant of the Jacob family fell silent. Only after a few seconds did a voice filled with horror utter, "Why, you are Blasphemer Amon." Inside the tree hole, the worm with rings began crawling out. However, they quickly stiffened and froze in their spots. Amon adjusted the crystal monocle and said with a smile, "That's too late now, isn't it? It might have been of some use if you had struggled and resisted from the beginning. But now, do you believe that I'm here on my own?" As he spoke, the trees around him shook as the leaves of different trees ruffled. Birds leaped onto the branches and let out crisp chirping. And even the night breeze had an indescribable feel to it. "You?" The Jacob descendant inside the mutated tree's speech came to an abrupt halt. Amon stuffed his hands into the pockets of his trench coat and casually laughed. "I heard that your family has split into tiny families with zero interaction. Afraid that the lot of you will be caught by me, right? Ah, right. Didn't you establish a secret organization with Zoroast's descendants, as well as other Beyonders of the Marauder Pathway? I believe it's called the Hermits of Fate. You're probably a member, aren't you? Let me see if I can replace you and infiltrate that organization." Heh. A secret organization meant to defend against Amon and deal with Amon has Amon participating in it. Just the thought of it is rather interesting. Having said that, he glanced at the mutated tree that was vigorously shaking and said, "Unfortunately, from what I can see from your fate, you didn't undergo a good education in mysticism. You can't be a member of that organization. Are you the only one left of this Jacob family branch? You wish to seek out a secret treasure left by the Jacob family in Backlund, but you ended up seriously injured for some reason and ended up sealed? You even parasitized an ordinary animal. Yet, there are signs of you not talking to humans for an extended period of time. Aren't you very puzzled as to why you didn't receive any warnings about this from the knowledge contained within the potion or the murmurs when you advanced to sequence 4? Yes, it's because I've deleted them." "No!" A sharp scream filled with anger and viciousness sounded. There was an indescribable pain in it. The mutated tree's tremblings intensified until it calmed down at some point. Streams of light flew out from within and surged into Amon's body. Taking out a piece of silk, Amon took off his monocle and wiped it as he mumbled, "How foolish. She actually believed me when I said it's too late." One flaw with fellows who are on the brink of losing control is that they're brainless and easily fooled. If she had carefully thought about it, how could she not realize the problems within? If I could quickly finish her off and steal her fate, why would I be wasting so much time chatting with her? An avatar is an avatar after all. After Amon wore his monocle again, the stream of light that flowed out of the mutated tree had been completed absorbed by him. At this moment, a figure was passing through the woods hazel in hunting gear. She seemed to sense something as she subconsciously looked over, only to see Amon. Then, she revealed a surprised smile. "Teacher, have you recovered? Oh, someone has noticed a problem with you. It's best that you hide." Amon listened in silence before curling the sides of his mouth slowly. "All right." Chapter 984 Active Response. Klein didn't directly teleport back to 160 Buckland Street. Instead, he went to sea with Anuni, found a secluded spot, and chanted the honorific name of the fool. Then, he took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the grey fog. With a beckon, he summoned a paper figurine. Immediately after that, he picked up one of the cards of blasphemy on the long bronze table in front of him, and he placed it inside his body. Klein suddenly had an additional dark red robe. This appearance seemed to look like rust and settled gunpowder that had been stained by copious amounts of blood. As for his face, it was covered by a dark gold mask. The patterns on it were ancient and set off a contrasting appearance with the crown he wore that was embedded with gems that sparkled red, blue, and green. This was a change that the Red Priest card brought about. After repeated experiments, Klein had confirmed that certain traits of the Red Angel card were very compatible with the Paper Angel's interference effect with fate. It allowed the relevant powers of the mysterious space above the grey fog to be further enhanced. Therefore, he had chosen it instead of the Black Emperor or Tyrant cards. After completing this, Klein, in the form of the Red Priest, picked up a paper figurine and shook it. He then fused it with the grey fog that surged over, throwing it at the rippling blob of light that represented him offering a prayer. The paper figurine quickly burgeoned, turning into an angel bathed in golden light. Flames crisscrossed behind it, taking on the form of 12 pairs of wings. This war angel then used the secret connection that was generated from a prayer to descend upon the world and enveloped Klein and Anuni with its fiery wings. Only with this done did Klein relax. Putting down the Red Priest card, he returned to the real world. He first sought out food for creeping hunger before returning to 160 Buckland Street with Anuni. One transformed back into Dwayne Dantes, while the other turned into a young man with mixed blood. After combing his hair, Klein walked to the balcony of his master bedroom. Looking far into the distance where Mock's residence stood, he discovered that the place remained brightly lit, a clear indication that the ball hadn't truly ended. Typically, a ball continued until midnight, and of course, people were permitted to leave before then. After all, most people that were willing to dance late into the night were young adults. Phew. Amon is truly terrifying. Just a battle involving a Marauder Pathways demigod was enough to garner his attention, even if one was in the city and the other was in the suburbs. At his level, the law of beyonder characteristic convergence should be extremely substantial. Yes, I can't eliminate the possibility that the demigod's mutation while being on the brink of losing control had caught Amon's notice. Klein couldn't help but recall everything that had happened, afraid that he would find a thin, monocle-wearing young, refined man sitting in a reclining chair behind him while sipping from a glass of red wine when he turned around. He felt lucky that he had already become a demigod and could converge the aura of the grey fog to prevent beyonders of particular pathways from detecting it. Otherwise, with the interest Amon had shown in the past, his focus definitely would have been placed on Gehrman Sparrow instead of the Marauder Pathway demigod. If that had been the case, he might not have left so successfully by teleporting, as the Amon in Backland was likely only an avatar. Klein was still rather confident of the Paper Angel's interference. He believed that this King of Angels had no means to trace him all the way to 160 Buckland Street from a trail of breadcrumbs, and also determined that he was Dwayne Dantes. But this still didn't ease his mind. This was because the Marauder Pathway demigod was involved in Buckland Street as well. She had encountered Admiral of Blood here and had been forced to trigger the explosives, finally parasitizing a rat. Here, she had been warned by a mirror, learning about the Marauder Pathway Angel who was in need of replenishments and that blasphemer Amon was on the way. As she had refused to answer the mirror's question, she was struck by lightning, and had to move to Moose Manor. In addition, Hazel, the target she attempted to parasitize but was her student on the surface, was influenced by a powerful illusion tonight, exposing her teacher's condition. All of these factors combined might make Amon pay a visit. The more Klein thought about it, the more unsafe he found Buckland Street. From his point of view, just the warning about a Marauder Pathway Angel in desperate need for replenishments was enough for Amon to take up residence in Buckland Street for a period of time. Of course, there was an extremely small chance that the Marauder Pathway demigod escaped and that nothing was divulged. However, Klein believed it was impossible. After all, even he had the confidence of handling the matter himself, much less Amon, who had a certain level of control over Marauder Pathway existences. Sigh, I shouldn't have been wary against the grandpa in Leonard. If I wasn't worried that he would achieve another stage of recovery and cause Leonard harm, everything would have been settled rather quickly. I wouldn't be in this situation of attracting Amon. What do I do next? Regardless, I need to do something. Otherwise, not only will my identity as Dwayne Dantes be at risk, I might even implicate Leonard on Pinster Street and the ordinary people on Buckland Street. Who knows if Amon will suddenly parasitize them or not? As Klein's thoughts whirled, his expression grew heavy as he began seriously considering eliminating Amon's avatar. His first idea was to establish contact with Leonard and come up with a plan with the grandpa in him, Palez Zoroast. With this marauder angel's knowledge of Amon who shared the same pathway, it was likely that he could come up with a good plan. Klein immediately took out his pen and paper in preparation to write. But after making a few scribbles with the fountain pen, he paused. He found the confidentiality lacking because describing in detail might result in having an effect on fate, allowing Amon to notice it ahead of time. The more secure method would be to pull Leonard above the gray fog. The discussion can be held there and have him relay it and discuss it with Palez Zoroast. Apart from this, what else can be done? Report it to the church and get them to disinfect all of Backland? Klein put down his fountain pen and muttered silently as he considered other proposals. He soon gave up the thought of reporting Amon, because Leonard hadn't done so previously. With the understanding that the grandpa in him had of blasphemer Amon, it implied that this method was useless. Either there was a huge flaw, or it might end up affecting oneself. It's better to ask Leonard first and gain a better situation of the exact situation before coming to a decision. Klein quickly made up his mind. He temporarily suppressed the urge to draw the symbol to Aska Rhodes or use the paper crane to contact Snake of Fate Willa Septon. After dismissing Anuni, he entered the master bedroom's bathroom, took 4 steps counterclockwise, and arrived above the gray fog. Sitting at the seat of the fool, Klein conjured the world Gairman Sparrow and made the fake person pray piously. Honorable Mr. Fool, please inform Leonard Mitchell that I've discovered traces of blasphemer Amon. I hope that he can head to your kingdom as soon as possible to discuss the subsequent actions. The time will be up to him to decide. After throwing the prayer's content into the crimson star representing Leonard, Klein added as the fool, there's no need to hide it from Palez Zoroast. In the outskirts of North Borough, in a sparse forest, Leonard extended his right hand and held down a blurry wild wolf's figure. The wolf whimpered as the flames burning in its eyes dissipated, returning to normal. Its body faded away and vanished into the wind. However, it no longer had the bloodthirsty feeling it previously exuded. All was calm and serene. In the northern continent, after the Pale Era, the 7 Orthodox churches, along with the various nations, jointly pushed for a cemetery burial act which had been strictly carried out to this day. As the number of humans that turned into ghosts were rare, the only exception involved the difficult-to-detect deaths in the slums or drowning victims that couldn't be fished out in time. However, the spirits of the deceased weren't only limited to humans. All kinds of wild animals and all kinds of creatures with spirituality could become specters under certain conditions. Furthermore, it was impossible for them to head to human cemeteries to have themselves interred. This often resulted in rumors of ghost sightings in the wild. Just as he put the wild wolf to rest, Leonard suddenly saw a boundless grayish-white fog appear before his eyes as the world Gairman Sparrow's prayers resounded in his ears. Traces of blasphemer Amon. He is still in Backland. Leonard's eyelids twitched as he tensed up immediately. As he had received Mr. Fool's instructions, he didn't hesitate to speak with a suppressed voice. Old man, did you see it? Did you hear it? Palez Zoroast's slightly aged voice resounded once again. No, although I sensed an anomaly, I didn't see or hear anything. It will only happen if I deepen my parasitization of you, allowing me to directly control your astral projection. Do you think I'm a fool? From the looks of it, Mr. Fool's response is done through the astral projection. Leonard thought before he said in deliberation, Old man, Klein informed me via Mr. Fool that he has discovered traces of Amon. He wants me to head over to Mr. Fool's kingdom to discuss this matter. Do you have any suggestions? Palez Zoroast fell silent for a few seconds before he let out a long sigh. If he wishes to deal with Amon's avatar in Backland, tell him that unless he has the blessings of concealment, the outcome will be as you expect it to be. By saying this, Old Man is giving preconditions. He means that he will only be willing to cooperate with the blessings of concealment? Leonard's mind raced as he immediately found a dark corner and informed the world Klein via prayer that he could do it immediately. As for the danger that resulted from losing control of his body in the wilderness, Leonard wasn't worried since he still had a marauder pathway angel in his body. Before long, he saw a crimson tide surge towards him and inundate him. Chapter 985 Blessed of concealment above the boundless grayish-white. Inside the magnificent palace. Just as Leonard Mitchell's figure appeared to the side of the long bronze table, he subconsciously stood up and wanted to bow to Mr. Fool. However, when he looked over, he found the seat empty. No one was sitting there. Doesn't Mr. Fool usually sit there? A thought flashed through Leonard's mind as he cast his gaze to the other end of the long mottled table. The world was sitting there silently as though he was fused with the gray fog in an indistinct blur. There's only the two of us. There's no need to deliberately use Gairman Sparrow's appearance, Leonard casually said to the world as he sat back down. After discovering Mr. Fool's absence, he instantly became relaxed. He wasn't as reserved as he was in the previous tarot gathering, just short of throwing his leg up on the table. It's a habit, Klein replied succinctly. Leonard nodded in thought. I heard that Gairman Sparrow's persona at sea is a cold, reserved, refined, and polite person. Your current performance matches that description very well. However, you wasn't like this in the past, Klein. You have to remember that you're only acting. Do not be affected by your persona as Gairman Sparrow. Hey, I pulled you up here to discuss Amon, not to have a chat. Why do you show so little concern towards your grandpa's matters? Klein had indeed made it a habit to use the world's persona in such situations. But when this was pointed out by Leonard, he was a little embarrassed to change back into his original appearance. He tersely acknowledged that he would keep it in mind. Did Palaz Zoros teach you about the part that you're only acting? Yes, Leonard answered frankly. This grandpa seems pretty good. He mentioned such crucial information to Leonard. Compared to him, the rat demigod from before was really up to no good. She didn't teach Hazel any of the most common knowledge. Even if she did, she distorted some of it. Heh, no matter how unaffiliated you are, how could they not know anything at the level of a demigod? Even that half-crazy sea serpent, Calvetua, knew how to respond to rituals or obtain sacrificial items. It even knew some theurgy and how to perform bestowments. Klein established a first impression of Palaz Zorost. However, he wasn't hasty to make a judgment. After all, fishing was an activity that required bait. Just one instance didn't prove much. Seeing Klein being silent, Leonard cut the small talk and got down to business. Where did you discover traces of blasphemer Amon? Klein went straight to the point. I was pursuing a demigod of the Marauder pathway, who was on the brink of losing control. However, I ended up encountering Amon in the outskirts of Backlund. All I could do was use Mr. Fool's powers to directly escape. Amon's avatar really is still in Backlund, Leonard sighed before he asked in a rather curious and desultory manner. Why were you pursuing a Marauder pathway demigod who's on the brink of losing control? After he asked the question, he realized something and swiftly added, if it involves some plans of Mr. Fool, pretend as though I never asked. Why? Isn't dealing with Beyonders on the brink of losing control, or those who have lost control, the duty of a Nighthawk? Klein sighed when he heard Leonard's question. It stirred up memories of his time in Tingen City. In that short 2+ months, he had handled many similar matters. It included the mandated punisher of the Church of Storms who turned into a monster, Hood Eugen's loss of control, and Old Neil's corruption by the hidden sage. Although they were only a handful, they left a deep impression on him. It drilled certain actions deep to the bone. Therefore, after taking into account everything that he knew, and coming to the conclusion that the Marauder pathway demigod was on the brink of losing control after rabidly biting someone, he didn't hesitate and used his illusion from downstairs. From that, he gained confirmation from Hazel and didn't even wait a day or two to make preparations. All he did was do a divination above the grey fog and came up with a rough plan before taking action. Such matters were emergencies for him. In addition, Klein had long had the intention of getting rid of the Marauder pathway demigod because the malintent she had shown when dealing with Hazel was obvious. Furthermore, she had tried to entice Miss Magician to seek out treasure that was in actual fact a trap. If he wasn't a demigod back then, which meant a great difference in strength, he would have taken action back then. Besides, he was also afraid that he would trigger unnecessary accidents. It was precisely because of this that he followed his predetermined plan to eliminate her once he confirmed the Marauder pathway demigod's condition. The first stage of his plan was to lure the enemy out of Moose Manor to prevent her from producing her incomplete mythical creature form before dying, as that would have affected the ordinary people. The result was pretty satisfactory. With himself as the bait, he achieved his goal, but he failed to use the air cannon bombardment to finish the battle. This made the Marauder Pathway demigod flee into the woods and parasitize a tree. Klein actually had a second stage to his plan, and had even prepared contingencies in the event he failed to eliminate her. To his surprise, Amon suddenly appeared, making him terminate all his plans and flee without any hesitation. Klein's contingency was to let a marionette escape the battlefield and write to the experimental demigod byproduct of the numinous episcopate, Patrick Bryan, to get his help. This undying likely possessed the ability to traverse the spirit world after all. And if there were any additional unforeseen circumstances, he could summon Miss Messenger and make payment after the deed. As his memories surfaced, Klein replied to Leonard with a sighing tone. A secret. After pausing for a second, he asked, why didn't you find an opportunity to inform the Church of Evernight about the arrival of Amon's avatar in Backland? Leonard hurriedly gave an explanation, indicating that if Amon's actual body were to arrive, a deity's descent was almost certain. He also explained that Amon could use the death of his avatar to see the corresponding changes in destiny, thus finding the source of the stir and figuring out the activity range of the mastermind. It was also Amon's style to circle about a superficial avatar but hide a dozen, dozens, or hundreds of avatars. Amon's avatars could parasitize all kinds of creatures with spirituality. If one wasn't a demigod, they wouldn't even notice the parasite. Towards the end, Leonard informed Klein in detail about the example old man had raised of how Amon would steal one's destiny. This sent a chill running down Klein's back, thankful that he hadn't been rash in dealing with Amon. Otherwise, Mr. Fool might have been replaced. It's no wonder Leonard didn't report the matter. For Amon to appear so openly, he is actually fishing. Furthermore, he has even more avatars hiding in secret, and he can parasitize the microbes in the air. This alone sends my scalp tingling. The creatures I can control at the moment can't even reach that state. The smaller the creature, the harder it is to see the spirit body threads. It's quite a special case. Sigh, I can't use the Church's power, unless it's done by someone who is without any problems in every aspect. Klein commiserated as he gained a deeper understanding of Amon's terror. It left him a deeper impression. From his point of view, Leonard was an excellent candidate to report the matter to the Church of Evernight, but with Pallas Zoroast parasitizing him, he didn't dare expose his existence to Amon. In addition, the hanged man could also shoulder this responsibility, but he was unable to provide the source of the news. This meant problems that deserved deeper investigations into. One choice after another flashed across Klein's mind. Finally, he paused on himself his identities as Klein Moretti and Gehrman Sparrow. As a blessed of Evernight, it's entirely reasonable for me to inform the Church about Amon's appearance in Backland. Amon won't be able to pick faults with that. And having involved myself with the battle with the Marauder Pathway demigod tonight, as the bizarro sorcerer who witnessed Amon and is now in possession of the knowledge that the Angel of Time's avatar is here in Backland, it's also very normal and not something that will garner Amon's suspicion. At the same time, as I'm a blessed of Evernight, just the loss of an avatar likely won't incur his full wrath for revenge. After all, he might be facing a very possible Trape deity's descent. Having a backer really feels good. However, a price is always exacted for what fate bestows. Klein quickly came to a conclusion over the matter. Then, he habitually changed his point of view and began considering this matter from Amon's point of view. Amon is definitely no stranger to bizarro sorcerers. He can determine my pathway for my control of the marionettes and my swapping of locations. Since Amon allowed a bizarro sorcerer to flee, he must have made preparations to be exposed. He might even be hoping to attract the target he is looking for. I was using Gehrman Sparrow's face, but that doesn't imply anything. A faceless appearance is the least of one's concern. Then how would Amon determine my identity? A powerhouse that lurks in the dark and a demigod of the seer pathway. As the Church of Evernight and the Secret Order are in control of the formulas, ingredients, and a mermaid, there are almost no unaffiliated bizarro sorcerers. The descendants of the Antigonus family have all been wiped out. Therefore, a bizarro sorcerer is either from the Secret Order or a secret proxy that the Church of Evernight secretly nurtures. Together with me being in Backland, the answer is almost obvious. Due to these reasons, Amon wouldn't find it difficult to determine that the Church of Evernight is aware of his whereabouts and will begin an operation to wipe him out. My reporting of him will be within expectations. Not doing so would be abnormal. Yes, he will definitely be hiding. Even if he replaces the identity of that Marauder Pathway demigod, he wouldn't come to Buckland Street anytime soon. Having made this judgment, Klein immediately felt a little more relieved because it meant that he would have plenty of time to prepare. What ideas do you have? Seeing Klein's prolonged silence after he finished his description, Leonard couldn't help but ask. Klein reined in his thoughts and asked without answering him. What suggestions does Palaz Zoroast have regarding this? He said that if you wish to deal with Amon's avatar in Backland, you have to first obtain the blessings of concealment, Leonard replied truthfully. Blessings of concealment. Palaz Zoroast is openly trying to test me. Half the symbol behind the Fool's seat represents concealment. Using paper angels and the red priest card, I can stir the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog, making it possible for me to disrupt Amon's avatar. However, it's probably unable to prevent him from prying into fate itself. However, I still have another identity as Evernight's Blessed, and another title of the goddess is the Mother of Concealment. Is eliminating Amon's avatar considered paying the price or receiving a bestowment? Seems like both. Klein thought before replying in a deep voice. Tell Palaz Zoroast that I'm a blessed of concealment. I will attempt to pray for help. He was referring to being the blessed of the Mother of Concealment, but it was certain that Palaz Zoroast would understand it as being the Fool's blessed. Chapter 986 The infectiousness of parasitizing. So Mr. Fool also has authority in the aspect of concealment. Leonard came to a realization as he understood why Old Man had specially mentioned the need for the blessings of concealment. Without waiting for his reply, Klein added, in addition, tell Palaz Zoroast that Amon might very well know that there's a marauder pathway angel in the vicinity of Buckland Street. This. Leonard's pupils dilated as he blurted out. How would he know that? It's not convenient to tell you why. Klein mumbled inwardly before replying rather sternly. It's not like I'm Amon. Which of his actions or words made you come to this conclusion? Leonard asked subconsciously. No, it's me who told him. Klein chuckled as a response. Indeed. Leonard nodded and said, no problem. I'll inform Old Man of this. He paused for a moment before asking, are you waiting for him to give a detailed plan? Klein tersely acknowledged. When it comes to the knowledge of Amon and the marauder pathway, few are better than him. Having said that, Klein, who had determined that Amon wouldn't come to Buckland Street anytime soon, calmly added, there's no need to be in a rush to respond. Give me the feedback at tomorrow's tarot gathering. From the looks of it, things haven't reached a critical stage yet. Leonard figured out the most important information from Klein's words. He nodded slightly and said, all right, we will discuss this in detail at tomorrow's tarot gathering. After settling this matter, Klein immediately got up and bowed in the direction of the door of light. Mr. Fool, we are done. Leonard stood up, but before he could do anything, his vision became a blur as the crimson stellar light inundated him. When he snapped awake, he found himself in the sparse forest on the outskirts of Northborough. Is there anything you wish to tell me? Palaz Zoroast's slightly aged voice sounded. Leonard cleared his throat and said, Klein told me that he's a blessed of concealment. He can attempt to pray for help. Blessed of concealment. Indeed, Palaz sighed and said, tell him that as long as he can really gain the blessings of concealment, I'm willing to provide help when it comes to dealing with Amon and finding all his avatars hiding in Backland. Leonard wasn't surprised by this answer as he chuckled. Old man, you don't sound as weak as you make yourself out to be. Palaz Zoroast chuckled without a hint of anger in his tone. Didn't you read through Roselle's quotes? I recall that there's a saying that a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. That will depend on the breed of horse and camel, Leonard retorted habitually before asking. Old man, how should we deal with Amon? Do you plan on using yourself as bait? Ahem. Palaz snapped back. If that were the case, what we'll be facing will be Amon's actual body and not his avatars. When that happens, there's a high chance that it will instigate a deity's battle. I might still have a chance of escaping. As for you, perhaps you will return to Evernight's tenebrous heaven. Leonard could only reply with a chortle. Palaz Zoroast continued, unlike the similar powers of other pathways, Amon's avatars can rapidly strengthen himself by absorbing the beyonder characteristics of the marauder pathway, thereby splitting even more worms of time, allowing him to parasitize different creatures. As long as there's enough beyonder characteristics, this process can keep happening. Isn't this like the spread of a plague? Leonard felt a chill run down his back once again. If one had enough beyonder characteristics of the marauder pathway, Amon's avatars could go from parasitizing one person to the entire city. Pretty much. Palaz Zoroast affirmed Leonard's guess and sighed. To deal with Amon, this is the only way to take action. Using Marauder Pathway Beyonder characteristics at the demigod level to bait him out. As long as you successfully finish off one of his avatars, there are ways to seek out and eliminate the rest. However, Amon is a master of deceit. We need to be careful, otherwise it might appear like we are baiting him, but in actual fact, he is baiting you. On this matter, concealment is of utmost importance. I understand. Leonard sighed and turned to ask, how strong can Amon's avatar be? Palaz Zoroast fell silent for a few seconds as though in recollection. Finally, he said, in theory, his strongest avatar can reach the equivalent of a sequence 1, but it's almost impossible for him to do so. This will make his mental state unstable and show signs of losing control. Typically, one of his avatars is a worm of time, each starting off as a weak sequence 4. However, each possesses the trait of an angel capable of shattering Beyonder characteristics. By absorbing sufficient amounts of Marauder Pathway Beyonder characteristics, such an avatar can reach a level equivalent to a sequence 2. However, Amon seldom does so. His avatars will automatically fracture and create even more avatars. Furthermore, with the actual situation in Backland, it's very difficult for him to gather enough Beyonder characteristics that can raise his avatar to sequence 2. Leonard thought carefully for a moment before asking, so, we will be facing a group of almonds. Amongst them, a majority have the strength of a weak sequence 4, with a minority having the normal standards of a sequence 4, while an extremely small minority reaches sequence 3. With Amon's style, it's likely the case. However, you have to remember that Amon is good at deceit, Palaz Zoroast warned. In addition, based on the time since Amon's avatar arrived in Backland, the number of Marauder Pathway Beyonder characteristics he has gathered to date can't be too much. After all, this is Backland. Also, if the situation isn't right, his avatars will use the strongest one as the center and automatically gather together to achieve an elevation in strength. The most important matter when dealing with Amon is to not let matters develop to this stage. Otherwise, there's no stopping Amon from escaping, even if an angel of the concealment domain arrives. It's truly difficult to deal with him. Besides, it's just an avatar he randomly threw out to develop themselves. As expected of a king of angels, after Leonard made a poignant sigh. He suddenly recalled Klein's reminder and hurriedly said, the Angel of Time has apparently already locked onto a Marauder Pathway demigod. Klein said that he encountered Amon while pursuing the demigod. Also, Amon seems to know that there might be a Marauder Pathway angel hidden in the region around Baklund Street. Palaz Zoroast fell silent once again, remaining that way for a pretty long period of time. After a while, with Leonard unable to stop himself from prodding for a response, he lamented with a sigh, why is your former colleague as troublesome as you? What? Leonard wore a blank look. Pal Zoroast said in a peeved manner, the reason why Amon knows that there's a Marauder Pathway angel around Baklund Street is likely due to him. Old man, why you have the ability to decrypt? Leonard asked in puzzlement. Palaz harumphed. I was using my brain. Otherwise, why do you think there's the prefix of Baklund Street? That's true. Anything that has to do with Baklund Street can't avoid Dwayne Dantes. Could it be some problem that fellow Klein created? Only then did Leonard come to a realization. At this moment, Palaz sighed. Thankfully, he only said an angel and not my name. Otherwise, I suggest that we immediately leave Backland. Tell him that there are currently 2 solutions. First, it's to seek out a Grade 1 sealed artifact of the Marauder Pathway or find a demigod of the Marauder Pathway. Using them we design a trap. This entire process requires the blessings of concealment. Furthermore, it needs to be natural, reasonable, normal, and in no way incur suspicion. Second, wait for Amon to enter Baklund Street. He might do a combination of replacing someone's identity and infiltrating through the air. Therefore, your former colleague needs to see through the grafting of fate or notice the abnormalities in the microbes. Otherwise, no matter what plans are employed, it will simply be feeding Amon. Leonard's eyelid twitched when he heard that as he solemnly nodded. I'll discuss these matters with him tomorrow afternoon. All right. Palaz Zoroast sighed and said, also, if all the Amon avatars in Backland can be eliminated, most of the worms of time left behind will belong to me. As a form of replenishing himself. It's no wonder old man is willing to take the risk. Leonard asked in enlightenment. Do those worms of time have the beyonder characteristics of the marauder pathway? It might be the case in my hands, but not necessarily for others, Palez explained simply. The worms of time left when Amon's avatars die will indeed contain a sufficient amount of beyonder characteristics in the beginning, but they will quickly deplete and return to the main body. The corresponding power is needed to prevent this phenomenon from happening. Leonard first nodded before asking in confusion, why was the Lux siphon charms made from the worms of time so powerful? Palez instantly scoffed. Have you forgotten what the essence of the charm is? Its essence is the power obtained from a high-level existence. It then uses a material that can handle this power, as well as the powers obtained from the corresponding symbols, to stabilize it. The Worm of Time's role is to be a unique vessel. If the level is high enough, its essence is compatible, and there is sufficient spirituality, the requirements will be met. Therefore, the power of the Lux siphon charm actually comes from Mr. Fool? Leonard asked in thought. Palaz Zoros chuckled and said, yes, you can try praying to Amon as well and use his power to create Lux siphon charms. Of course, the uniqueness of the vessel material will also affect the effects of the final product. In other words, different special materials will lead to different characteristics in power based on the response. Sigh. Charms are a very profound and complicated piece of knowledge. It's not something that can be completely grasped by having some cursory education. You have to put more effort into it. Leonard immediately felt somewhat ashamed. On Monday afternoon, using the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog to check on Hazel's family to confirm that there weren't any problems in the meantime, Klein patiently waited for the convening of the tarot gathering. Dark red beams shot up in the ancient palace before gradually calming down. Without a pause, Audrey got up and bowed towards the end of the long model table. Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. Chapter 987, Warehouse Clearance. After the greetings, everyone took their seats. Audrey swept her gaze across the third card of blasphemy placed beside Mr. Fool's right hand. She suddenly came to a realization that she had forgotten to obtain Roselle's diary entries from the psychology alchemists this week. I've been caught up with the problem with Vin Rambus all week. Audrey, who felt that she had already brightened up, instantly felt a little melancholic. At this moment, Katlia had looked towards the seat of honor at the end of the long mottled table. She bowed her head and said, Honorable Mr. Fool, I haven't received any Roselle diary entries this week as well. Queen Mystic hasn't provided any of the Emperor's diary entries for 2 consecutive weeks. Did something happen? Leisurely sitting in his high-backed chair, the Fool Klein felt somewhat puzzled as he couldn't help but have pessimistic thoughts. However, he swiftly denied this possibility because Ma'am Hermit didn't show any anxiety or concern. With the way Admiral of Stars presents herself as a fledgling in need of her mother in the dream world in the ruins of the Battle of God, she definitely wouldn't be this calm if Queen Mystic doesn't reply to her for 2 consecutive weeks. Her anxiety might even prompt her to seek the Fool's help. That also means that she has received a reply from Bernadette in the past 2 weeks, but none of Roselle's diary entries were provided. Klein nodded gently and replied Katlia calmly, No hurry. After saying that, his thoughts raced as he began analyzing the reason for Bernadette's actions. First, Klein eliminated the possibility that she no longer had any more Roselle diary entries. Combining the frequency at which the Emperor wrote diary entries, he surmised that the compiled diary would exceed 10 standard books. Even if Bernadette only had a third of that, she was definitely capable of producing 1 or 2 books. In addition, the diary entries she had previously provided were just a tiny minority which touched on crucial intelligence. Second, Klein didn't believe that Queen Mystic had gained the entire truth from the answers he had given. Finally, he was also certain that she couldn't decipher the simplified Chinese she had in hand from the tidbits of feedback she received. After all, he didn't give a detailed translation, but vague answers comprising of a few words. Combining all 3 points, he suspected if the diary entries Bernadette planned on providing next would be even more important. They were more key and pointed to a certain secret or extremely special questions that made one unsure if they wanted to know the answer. Thus, this Queen Mystic was presently in a dilemma. It's likely the case. I wonder what the Emperor will write about. Besides, how is Bernadette able to know the importance of the entry? I should remember to get Ma'am Hermit to pass on my requests. While in thought, Alger had already turned to look at Leonard. I apologize. There's still no news of mystical items that meet your request at the moment. That's very normal. That's right. Mystical items from sequence 5 and 6 aren't common to begin with. Leonard nodded in understanding. He was originally sitting very straight, but when he found that the moon and the magician weren't so uptight, he also relaxed, relieving the straightening of his back. Upon seeing this, Klein controlled the world Gehrman sparrow and said with a hoarse voice, "I have a mystical item that suits your requests in various aspects. It's just that it has quite a number of negative effects that make it difficult to avoid. Do you want to consider it?" He was referring to the word of the sea. Klein had never had the intention of selling this item that almost required sealing to Leonard, as he felt that his dear poet friend couldn't withstand the negative effects of word of the sea. The belting of songs that didn't discriminate between ally or foe, the trait of tripping the wielder, or the flaw of being prone to lightning strikes weren't easily avoided. Klein was only able to use it by teaching the word of the sea above the grey fog a good lesson, and having Winner and Uni wield it to not be affected. He had even converted the flaws into something that could aid him. However, after considering how Leonard had a sequence 1 Marauder pathway angel parasitizing him, Klein had the feeling that Leonard might have the means to resolve the problem. Therefore, he ultimately made an inquiry. "Oh, tell me about it." Leonard believed that Klein wouldn't scam him, so he expressed his intentions of getting to know the exact situation. The world Gehrman sparrow glanced at the hanged man and said slowly, "It can release lightning on a target." He roughly described the beyonder powers of the word of the sea and the negative effects, leaving Leonard somewhat enticed despite frowning. "It can actually be used as a staff to allow me to fly. Even at sequence 5 Spirit Warlock, I'll need to seek out a suitable spirit before I can fly. Besides, the offensive strength really is formidable. There are quite a number of traits, but the 3 negative effects are quite terrifying. I'll return to ask Old Man to see if he has any means to reduce the negative effects." Leonard pondered for a few seconds before saying, "I'll take some time to consider it. How about I give you an answer next week?" "No problem," the world Gehrman sparrow replied without any hint of surprise. As for the other members, even if they were interested in the beginning, all of them gave up the thought of inquiring about the price once they heard the negative effects that the word of the sea possessed. At this moment, the fool Klein's mind was focused on another matter. He was wondering if he should take this opportunity to do a warehouse clearance sale. He had advanced to sequence 4, and after becoming a demigod, many of the items and characteristics he had before were no longer of much use. "I can keep creeping hunger. I should keep it just for traveling alone. In addition, it can graze 1 sequence 4 saint. It has room for further growth. Furthermore, the combination of the various beyonder powers it has is pretty good. The value of Death Knell is no longer that great, but after activating lethal attack mode, the damage it does on a fixed target exceeds that of air cannon. At the very least, I can still use it at sequence 4. Yes, it also has room for growth." The first 2 items that surfaced in Klein's mind were the 2 items he frequently used. From his point of view, as long as he obtained more powerful bullets, he could produce terrifying effects with Death Knell. The only problem was that such bullets were equivalent to high-level charms, nothing that could be easily found. Even if he sought out the materials to make them himself, he had to consider the chances of success when praying to some high-level existence or if it was possible for there to be a backlash. On this aspect, Klein came up with a few plans. Spray to the goddess. Request Snake of Mercury will accept and to provide help. Go through Leonard to get Pallas Zorost's help. Use the powers of the mysterious space above the grey fog and also get Leonard to make a trip back to Tingen under the guise of a mission, so as to steal some of the powers of the eternal blazing sun's divine blood from 3-0782, the mutated sun's sacred emblem. Flaring sun bullets are definitely the nemesis of creatures like evil spirits. I have some idea on how to use the materials via borrowing the power of the mysterious space above the grey fog. Amon's Worms of Time can be used to make luck siphon charms. My Worms of Spirit can also be made into beyonder bullets. As for how it can be done, I'll need to ask Pallas Zorost. Klein began anticipating the upcoming chat with Leonard. Worm of Spirit was the name he gave to those transparent maggots. Following that, he began considering the other items and characteristics. Sun Brooch? I currently lack such powers and items. Although I can use the control over spirit body threads to deal with evil spirits, I can keep it and allow my paper angel to have 1 more additional change. Besides, I can also lend it to Danitz from time to time. Flower of Blood? I can't sell it. The Tarot Club doesn't have any Aurora Order members. I'll continue letting my marionette use it. Having 1 additional life is 1 additional hope. Green Essence? I can sell this. I can transfer my ailments already. Creeping hunger also has a doctor grazed. Murloc cufflink? There's no need for this either. If I have a sudden need for its powers, I can transform into a huge fish. And in the long term, I can just head above the gray fog to use Sea God's scepter to augment myself with the effects. Broken finger? I wonder if anyone would want it. Besides, I haven't fully investigated why the rat demigod was sealed. It might be of use. I have 1 purifying bullet, 6 demon hunting bullets, and 2 exorcism bullets left. I'll just randomly use them. There's no need for me to sell them. Biological poison bottle? Sigh, I haven't been able to sell it all this time. Blatherer's aura? This can be used to make charms or bullets. I'll temporarily not sell it. But herein lies the problem. Am I to pray to the dark side of the universe? That can be struck off the list of options. I'll see if there are any replacement plans in the future. An interrogator beyonder characteristic, a lunatic beyonder characteristic, 15 milliliters of 1,000-faced hunter's blood, 40 grams of spirit world plunderer powder, an eyeball of a 6-winged gargoyle. Tarot Club members have no need for these. I might be able to reward the believers of Sea God or the resistance in Rorstad Archipelago. As these thoughts flashed across his mind, Klein quickly made a decision. As for items which were at least at the demigod level such as the Sea God's scepter, Grozel's travels, the Giant King's court key, he didn't consider selling them. Then he made the World Gehrman Sparrow say, I have 2 mystical items for sale. Their levels are relatively low. Katlia immediately replied, a low level doesn't mean it's useless. Many low sequence Beyonders powers can even turn the tides of battles involving sequence 5 Beyonders. I'm rather interested in knowing the detailed situation of those 2 mystical items. Klein nodded gently and described the uses and flaws of Murloc cufflink and green essence. After he was done he said, Murloc cufflink for £500, green essence for £1,000. Just as he said that, Audrey raised her arm. I wish to buy the Murloc cufflink. She actually wished to say that she wanted both. After all, the 2 mystical items have extremely minor negative side effects. However, considering how others might have their needs, she found it inappropriate for her to take them all. Audrey finally decided to only take Murloc cufflink. This could provide her a layer of illusory scales, preventing her from being easily caught. And more importantly, she didn't know how to swim. This could effectively make up for her weakness. As for the heat and the dry weather easily causing fatigue, she wasn't too worried about it. This was because, be it in Eastchester County or Backland, the temperature seldom exceeded 300 C. The humidity was also rather high. Seeing Miss Justice having her eyes on Murloc cufflink, the other members wisely gave up without raising the price, allowing the trade to quickly come to an end. Following that, Alger bought the green essence ring. To him, although the water domain had certain restorative spells, they were inferior to a dedicated item. As a Beyonder who often had to engage in melee battles, it was of great importance. As for attracting mosquitoes, Alger wasn't bothered. This was because he had illusory scales beneath his skin, preventing him from being afraid of bites. After the transaction segment came to an end, Emlyn cleared his throat and asked a question. Chapter 988 Joint Operation. Emlyn couldn't help but clasp his hands together, lift up his chin, and say to Miss Magician diagonally opposite him, I've already confirmed that the ancient abandoned castle in Delaire Forest is an internal test that the Sanguine had given me, having hidden the key situation. With that said, he felt as though a weight had been lifted off his chest. He no longer felt as hesitant, embarrassed due to the difficult situation he was in. He surveyed the area and looked for Ma'am Hermit's and Mr. Hanged Man's reaction. He realized that they appeared to have expected it, showing no signs of surprise. From the looks of it, they had already an idea when Miss Magician mentioned the problem with the intel. Emlyn nodded his head in secret and added before Miss Magician replied, I'm very sorry. I will refund you the £300 for the intel fee. In addition, I'll pay you another £300. Also, I will punish the Sanguine who deliberately omitted information. Although Mr. Moon always wears a proud demeanor, he's rather sincere when a mistake has been made. He didn't find an excuse to push the blame onto. However, I've already obtained the Ancient Wraith's cursed item and remnant spirituality, so the matter is already over. He didn't deliberately wish to cause harm to me and Zio. There's no need for me to get so much compensation. Furs remembered Zio's exhortations. Without looking at her, she said, "It's only a matter of oversight. There's no need for compensation. Just refunding me for the intel fee is sufficient." Just as she said that, she suddenly thought of something. Since the ancient abandoned castle was a test of the Sanguine, didn't that mean that Zio and herself had been targeted by the Sanguine? Furs finally couldn't hold back as she turned to glance at Zio. She found misjudgment shaking her head slightly, indicating that she hadn't discovered anyone monitoring them. Furs felt puzzled and found it inexplicable. She then allowed her thoughts to wander as she recalled the situation back then. We did the exploration only after quite a while. The Sanguine had already lost their patience by then? The boss of the town's inn knew of the ancient abandoned castle. He was a Sanguine in disguise? That's not right. Many of the locals knew of this matter. However, that place was too far away and there wasn't anything of value left inside. That's why, unless one was out hunting, people usually wouldn't head in that direction. That's not right. If the ancient abandoned castle were that dangerous, why are the people who use it for shelter from the rain completely fine? They only describe it as creepy and a little scary? Yes, the Sanguine would usually seal off the passage that heads underground. They opened it for the test? This means that there was some form of monitoring. Because the ancient castle is too dangerous, the monitoring was done outside the forest and not inside. As Zio and I got lost, we circled around the monitors and weren't detected? Mr. Fool didn't mention anything about it. It's probably not a huge problem. More attention needs to be taken when I return. As Furz's thoughts raced, Emlyn said after some pondering, "Okay." He didn't insist on additional compensation, because he believed that the best form of compensation was to punish Ern's boyar instead of giving money. Then, he waited for Miss Magician to ask about the punishment, hoping that he could take the opportunity to make an inquiry to the other Tarot Club members. He wanted to see if he could get any good suggestions. As for Furs, upon considering that it was an internal matter for the Sanguine and that although she was a victim, Mr. Moon hadn't offered a plan for action, she decided not to press further in consideration for his feelings. Instead, she decided to wait for the conclusion to see if it was satisfactory. The palace that looked like a giant's residence turned silent as the mood turned odd. Audrey looked opposite her and glanced to the side. Pursing her lips, she curiously asked, "Mr. Moon, how do you plan on punishing that Sanguine?" "Phew." Emlyn silently exhaled as he subconsciously looked at the world. He did so because of orders from the higher-ups. "I believe that this mistake isn't something that deserves payment with his life." In between the lines, Emlyn was implying that Mr. World didn't need to intervene in this matter. There was no need to escalate the matter. Seeing the world having no objections, Emlyn cast his gaze forward. "I plan on leading that Sanguine to a particular cathedral of the Church of Earth Mother in Backlund." Having participated in so many tarot gatherings, even if he couldn't be concerned about certain details, he knew the requirement of hiding matters regarding himself in the real world. Therefore, he didn't mention the Harvest Church. The Church of Earth Mother only has one cathedral in all of Backlund. That's the Harvest Church. The rest are all in the outskirts and surroundings villages. Leonard held back his laughter as he looked up at the dome above. "You wish to have the Beyonders of the Church of Earth Mother purify that Sanguine?" Furs blurted out in surprise. From her point of view, this was no different from directly killing the person in question. Emlyn was momentarily at a loss for words. At that moment, Katlia interrupted. "The Church of Earth Mother has the habit of inducting the Sanguine into the church, converting their faith and making them priests or bishops." "I see." With thoughts in mind, Audrey glanced at Mr. Moon without letting him notice it. Getting that Sanguine to become a member of the clergyman, to pray daily at the cathedral and do voluntary work, so as to cleanse the heart. He would be stuck doing this for a very long period of time. Mr. Moon's plan for punishment is really vicious. However, I like it. That fellow nearly made me and Zio turn into ancient wraiths due to the corruptive powers behind the door. Furs instantly felt her interest piqued as she asked, "Mr. Moon, how do you plan on luring the Sanguine into the Cathedral of Earth Mother? Have you worked out a plan? Perhaps I can provide some help." You have to be careful. You mustn't enter the Cathedral of Earth Mother in order to punish him. Teach that way, the only thing you can do is to request Mr. Fool for help. Of course, that might be something Mr. Fool wishes to happen, allowing him to have someone on the inside of the Church of Earth Mother. After saying that, Furs silently added. Upon hearing that, Leonard nearly laughed out. He was extremely certain that Mr. Moon was the Harvest Church's Emlyn White. Clearly, this sanguine was already a priest of Earth Mother. This is slightly akin to a drowning person pulling others in. Leonard held back his laughter, glanced at the world, and he found that his former colleague didn't seem perturbed. He appeared extremely somber. He couldn't help but think, is this the power of a clown, or is it a state that Klein is accustomed to? At the end of the long mottled table, the fool Klein nearly covered his mouth. He never expected Emlyn to be so creative. This was a little like multi-level marketing. Yet it's a little different. After all, it's not necessarily a good thing for Emlyn to know of that. Klein leaned back into his chair as he awaited the development with piqued interest. He had always kept in mind Miss Justice's advice during his last treatment session about not always wearing a thick mask. He tried his best to do so when opportunities arose so as to maintain a healthy mental state. Upon hearing Miss Magician's words of concern, Emlyn felt even more awkward because he went to the Cathedral of Earth Mother several times a day on a daily basis. He felt uncomfortable even if he skipped the weekends. He cleared his throat and said, I temporarily do not have a thought-out plan. I wish to get some suggestions from all of you. Yes, I hope that we do not have too intense a battle. It's difficult to ensure that the matter doesn't escalate, and I also do not wish for my identity to be directly exposed. Miss Magician, there are no problems regarding your participation, but we will absolutely not be meeting each other. His idea of not directly exposing his identity meant that he didn't mind that Ernst Boyar and the other sanguine could guess that he did it. It was a way to instill shock and awe in them, but it was best that there wasn't any obvious evidence. Furs tersely answered as she mimicked the other experienced members of the Tarot Club. First, you need to tell us what sequence that sanguine is roughly at and what he's good at. Emlyn was already prepared as he answered, it's equivalent to sequence 5. He's quite experienced and is good at creating the effects of the full moon. Effects of the full moon. Furs was taken aback as she turned agape but was unable to say a word. After Emlyn finished the introduction, Furs said with a hollow chuckle, I recall that I have other matters to tend to. It might not be convenient for me to participate in this matter. When in a state similar to the full moon, she would hear Mr. Door's ravings. And this meant that she would instantly be heavily injured by the target, losing all her combat strength. Emlyn frowned slightly, displeased with Miss Magician's sudden change in attitude. At this moment, Zio, who had been listening silently, said, I can participate. I just need a portion of the spoils. Miss Judgment's tone is very firm. It's like she wants to exact vengeance. Emlyn mumbled silently to himself and glanced at Ma'am Hermit and Mr. Hanged Man, only to discover that they temporarily had no intention of speaking. It appeared as though they wished to observe what kind of plan the Backlund members of the Tarot Club could come up with. As this involved her friends and how it could be the first mission that the Tarot Club members would participate in at the same time, Audrey was rather intrigued. After some observation, she said in deliberation, I can hypnotize that sanguine, allowing him to enter the Cathedral of Earth Mother himself. However, to not expose ourselves and to ensure a high chance of success, it's best that he's in a lost or half-dazed state while I hypnotize him. Mr. Moon, can you do that? Emlyn was summarizing his powers and items to consider a solution when Leonard suddenly laughed. That's simple, but I'll only be responsible for making that sanguine unconscious. Of course, the premise is that there's sufficient intel, and it depends on how we go about taking action. Just as he said that, Zio nodded and said, I'm good at tracking and investigation. You can leave intel matters to me. All right. First, Mr. Moon will have to inform me of that sanguine's name, address, and appearance. All right. Emlyn heaved a sigh of relief before saying in a somewhat lost manner, Then what's my part in all of this? Also, what kind of payment do you want? Chapter 989 Mentor Alger. Upon hearing the Moon's question, the rest of the Tarot Club members realized that the main instigator for the punishment had ended up with nothing to do. According to the established plan, all he needed to do was provide the name, address, and appearance before waiting for the outcome. Miss Judgment was in charge of tracking and investigations to figure out the target's patterns. Miss Justice and Mr. Star would then choose a suitable location based on the feedback before Mr. Star threw the sanguine into an unconscious state without attracting any attention. Miss Justice would then take this opportunity to complete a hypnotism act and make the target proceed to the predetermined location. In this entire process, there was nothing for the Moon. Audrey deliberated and said, Mr. Moon, what you need to do is to ensure that the hypnotized sanguine doesn't encounter any accidents on the way to the cathedral, without him struggling or being rescued. Upon saying that, Audrey suddenly realized a problem in the plan as she hurriedly added, if that sanguine is extremely resistant towards the Church of Mother Earth, the hypnotic effects wouldn't be as effective. Therefore, I plan on avoiding this point if possible. I will imbue in him the thought of nabbing some target he hates, so that he wouldn't realize that he's entering the intended cathedral during the pursuit. How about letting you be the target of his hatred? This will require you to be able to ensure your own safety while maintaining a distance without being caught. It's not a problem, Emlyn answered after some thought, with Duke Ulmer removing the mental corruption of the Sequence 5 artificial vampire Beyonder characteristic. Emlyn just needed to wait till a full moon to become a Viscount. That would place him equal to Ernst Boyar. And this opportunity was available next week. When that happened, he didn't believe that he would be caught up to buy a Viscount just like him when he was equipped with the Ancestor's Ring. If it really won't work, I can borrow Miss Magician's spellbook. I recall that there are powers in the wind domain. Emlyn was rather confident. By the side, Leonard felt a baffling sense of horror when he heard the conversation between Miss Justice and Mr. Moon. To him, no matter how terrifying a head-on battle was, it was nothing compared to the horror of doing something that went against his own will without him realizing it. He paused for a moment and replied to the second problem that Emlyn had raised. My payment is the same as misjudgment. I want a portion of the spoils. To Leonard, this entire matter required him to determine the time and location to pull the target into a dream before he left. He didn't need to care if the operation was successful or if any accidents cropped up. It was as simple as heading to a coffee shop to order a cup of Desi coffee. The only thing that needed him to take into account was to not expose himself. Therefore, he couldn't bring himself to ask for an advanced payment, planning to obtain a cut from the final spoils of war. In addition, he believed that this was a necessary thing to do in order to fully blend in with the Tarot Club. He didn't need to nitpick on such matters. Audrey turned her head and glanced at Zio before retracting her gaze. Revealing a smile, she said, My request is the same as Mr. Starr and Miss Judgment. I'll take a quarter of the spoils of war. In fact, she wasn't insistent on getting payment, because she believed that the Sanguine had bullied a Tarot Club member and her two friends. Punishing him was something she expected of herself. The reason why she took a portion of the spoils of war was to take into account Mr. Moon's feelings. She was afraid that her voluntary help would leave the prideful Sanguine embarrassed and angry. Furthermore, Mr. Moon doesn't have any money, so the payment can only be the spoils of war. Audrey added silently. Although she didn't deliberately keep count, based on her ability to take note of details and the memory of a spectator, she believed that Mr. Moon, who had spent £5,000 to purchase the Sequence 5 artificial vampire Beyonder characteristic, wasn't in the best financial state. Furthermore, he had to refund the intel fee that he earned. For participants, with each obtaining a piece of the spoils of war. That's very fair. Emlyn nodded and surveyed the area. Any other suggestions? Furs asked in disbelief. It's that simple? That's a Sanguine equivalent to a Sequence 5. The plan you came up with sounds like it would succeed very easily. In her mind, Sequence 5 Beyonders were the strongest among unaffiliated Beyonders. Some were even the host of gatherings. Even the powerful pirate admirals were of that sequence. But now, in the conversation of the Star and the others, such a Sequence 5 was to be finished so simply. There didn't seem to be any difficulties. Upon hearing her question, Leonard thought and said, As long as that Sanguine doesn't have any items that resist my powers, even if he's equivalent to a Sequence 5, I'll definitely be able to throw him into an unconscious state for some time. It will just depend on Miss Justice to grasp this opportunity. If I arrange the location and make preparations ahead of time, I'll be fine, Audrey replied in a confirmatory tone. She was actually a little uneasy. After all, this was her first time in battle, but her confidence over her Beyonder powers and knowledge in psychological mysticism allowed her to say those words with confidence. After Furs heard the response, she suddenly felt her mind a little adrift. Without realizing it, apart from Mr. World, the rest of the Tarot Club members have the ability to finish off Sequence 5 Beyonders as well. That's right. Miss Justice is already a Sequence 6 hypnotist. With the cooperation of a Beyonder of the same level, there really is a relatively high chance of hypnotizing a Sequence 5 Beyonder. Just as Emlyn felt that this matter had been settled without needing any more questions to be raised, Alger, who had been observing from the side, spoke. As members of a secret organization, I believe that everything needs to be considered at a deeper level. Ah! Emlyn and Leonard cast their gaze at Mr. Hanged Man with a puzzled look. Audrey and Zio were taken aback before they realized something. Alger cleared his throat and looked at Derek. Since Delaire Forest's abandoned ancient castle was a test, why isn't the obvious Sanguine a test as well? Exactly. I knew that Mr. Hanged Man would have given a warning. The fool Klein controlled the world Gehrman's sparrow to nod. Katlia then looked at the Hanged Man with a look of approval and agreement. This. Emlyn's pupils constricted, at a loss for a retort. In an instant, he found himself too careless. Leonard was taken aback. Immediately, he realized that he was too desultory. He had involved himself without fully understanding the details and without consideration of any latent risks. Of course, this style had to do with his identity as an official Beyonder and its thought processes. As expected of Mr. Hanged Man. He considers all the details with such meticulousness. Audrey, you need to build up more experience. Audrey focused on something else as she asked, so we need to abandon the punishment and take action when the Sanguine are unable to maintain the secret surveillance? Alger chuckled and said, there's no need to. Just a few acts of misdirection would do. He then looked at Emlyn and said, first, hand the investigation of the Sanguine to bounty hunters in Backland. Use their existence to hide misjudgment's actions. Second, when determining the location, try to do it near an Orthodox deity's cathedral. This will effectively disrupt any subsequent divinations. Third, before Miss Justice and the others take action, you have to do something that leaves one suspicious but is nothing eye-catching. Make it seem like you will be exacting revenge somewhere else so as to attract the eyeballs of the secret monitor away, thus creating the desired opportunity. This is combined with the first point. Fourth, only after the Sanguine is successfully hypnotized do you become the bait. Having said that, Alger paused. If there's the addition of anti-divination and anti-prophecy at the demigod level, this entire matter will be flawless. Of course, Miss Justice, Mr. Starr, you must be disguised during the operation, without leaving behind any traces. This speech left most of the members taken aback, especially Derek. He couldn't help show his respect and amazement. Although he had no means of participating in this punishment operation, as a member of the Tarot Club, he couldn't help but be concerned and pensive about such matters that required a clear line of thought. He hadn't noticed any problems with the original plan of Mr. Moon and company, so now, he couldn't help but be impressed by Mr. Hanged Man's ability in such matters. Emlyn thought and said, you mean that I should use a superficial form of punishment to hide Miss Justice's and Mr. Starr's secret operation? It's like I would make it appear that I'll take action in a particular corner of a square after the target leaves a coffee shop, attracting all the attention, but in actual fact, Miss Justice and company would have already completed the hypnosis inside the coffee shop without anyone realizing it? Alger nodded gently. That's right. I learned something new. Mr. Hanged Man really is an experienced Beyonder. Audrey felt overjoyed receiving an epiphany. The problem now is where are we to find an item or charm with anti-divination and anti-prophecy effects at the demigod level? Leonard also felt that he had enriched himself greatly as he asked. He wasn't too worried about himself since he had an angel grandpa in him. Furs made an utterance before saying, I can lend out Laymanose Travels. On it there's Angel's Embrace. I can also take one portion of the spoils of war. As she said that, she secretly glanced at the world Gehrman sparrow, heaving a sigh of relief when he saw the gentleman silent. Unbeknownst to her, the fool Klein had a very simple thought. Angel's Embrace. That sounds so much better than Paper Angel. With the punishment operation finally confirmed, Audrey didn't hesitate as she surveyed the area. I met the psychology alchemist's counselor, Vin Rambus, last week. What? Vin Rambus is a counselor of the psychology alchemists? Leonard sat up in surprise. He had the urge to immediately report it to the Archbishop and gather a team to arrest him. It was an occupation hazard. Chapter 990 interferes almost instinctively. Leonard looked around the table and realized that none of the other Tarot Club members showed any hint of surprise. Instead, they were listening attentively. They knew of it long ago? That's right. This is only my second gathering. I haven't had the chance to learn about many things. The secrets that get exchanged here sure are plentiful. Leonard retracted his gaze and returned to his original sitting posture. After a slight pause, Audrey glanced at Zio, who sat 2 seats away from her, before casting her gaze at Mr. Hanged Man. She continued, "He attempted to cue me to interact with different nobles and understand their true attitude over different matters. I would then inform him of them. Thankfully, Mr. Fool had provided me with the blessings of an angel. So I wasn't influenced in any way. What should I do next?" "You can even get blessings from an angel?" Leonard looked around in surprise once more, only to see no reaction from the other members of the Tarot Club. Obviously, he wasn't surprised that Mr. Fool had a few angels in existence under him. After all, the name and title corresponding to Death Consul was one that he had heard numerous times. He was just surprised that the Tarot Club members were able to pray for assistance at that level. He viewed this secret organization in a new light, finding it more impressive. Meanwhile, Xiao keenly caught on to a few keywords: noble, psychology alchemists. Combining it with the blonde hair, emerald green eyes of Miss Justice's blurry figure, she began to connect it to a particular friend, Audrey Hall. However, she couldn't be sure because blonde hair, black hair, blue eyes, and green eyes were common among the lone nobles. People just had different combinations. Besides, no one knew how many members the psychology alchemists had developed in the noble circles. Therefore, Xiao couldn't directly point it at Miss Audrey from the traits she noticed. As she tried to do a deeper level of observation, Alger had said, "There's no need to pay too much attention to this. The various Orthodox churches will provide protective measures to their believers with a rather important status. They will prevent them from being assassinated or hypnotized. This comes from experience that has been built up over 1,000 years of history. It wouldn't be that easily overcome." From another angle, if the psychology alchemists really can control the nobles that simply by hypnotizing them, the ones ruling the country wouldn't be the royal family and the 3 churches. Clearly, reality is in conflict with that. Yes, just as you said, Vin Rambis only gave you a cue to observe the true attitudes of the different nobles on different matters. This means that he's holding himself back greatly, afraid of doing anything too overboard. It's to prevent himself from leaving behind any clues. In addition, your true status among the nobles should just be in the periphery. You have no way of directly involving yourself in various political matters. Therefore, in contrast, the protection and monitoring over you wouldn't be too strict. This is also why Vin Rambis targeted you. Mr. Hanged Man's analysis is really detailed. Although he often taught Little Sun and the others, he would secretly gain something during the process, wishing that he could get more useful information from the feedback. However, there's none of that this time. It's the same for the suggestions for the punishment operation from before as well. On careful thought, his change has been happening for quite some time. It just wasn't too obvious in the past. I even missed out on it. Audrey's professionalism stirred up as she quickly did a mental analysis of the Hanged Man. She quickly had a theory, suspecting that Mr. Hanged Man was trying to transform his standing within the Tarot Club. Ever since Ma'am Hermit joined the Tarot Club and showcased her resources and channels at sea, Mr. Hanged Man has been unknowingly searching to transform himself in a bid to distinguish himself from her. Before problems cropped up with the artisan, this transformation wasn't that obvious. Even Mr. Hanged Man didn't realize it himself. It was only recently that he seemed to finally come to a realization and thought it to be true. Indeed, to maintain one's standing in the Tarot Club, the raising of one's strength is one aspect, but providing help to the entire group is another aspect. Audrey's mind raced as she turned her attention back to the topic at hand. She pondered for a moment and subconsciously, her tone turned heavy. Does this also mean that the Orthodox churches will have certain levels of surveillance, control, and guidance for the important nobles? This was something that she had thought about while in the Lone Charity Bursary Foundation's office. She had subconsciously drawn a scene that represented her concerns on this matter. In psychology, elements she drew out in such a state often didn't point to something particular. It was more like an abstract expression. The cold eyes mostly represented her fear for people monitoring and controlling her and her family. Combining it with her subconscious drawing, her worry of Vin Rambis's cueing, and the celebrant of the Mass at the Church of Evernight her parents attended being Baklan's archbishop, Audrey's interpretation was that not only was she afraid of the hypnosis and cues of the psychology alchemists, but she had also become fearful of the Orthodox churches. She couldn't be sure if they would directly use their beyonder powers to imbue thoughts into aristocratic believers with high standings, so as to guide them into doing actions that violated their true will. This was sacrilegious and rebellious to Audrey, who had received an Orthodox education from a young age. Therefore she had tensed up back then, immediately burning that drawing. After hearing Miss Justice's question, Alger scoffed. Isn't that very normal? When living in human society, one has to accept a certain level of surveillance, control and guidance. I know what you're afraid of, but think about it. Compare someone using their power conferred from their standing, using money and weapons to control and guide others, to using beyond powers to do something similar. In essence, is there any difference? The difference is that one knows that they don't wish to do it but ends up having to do it. The other is that they do not even have the thoughts of being unwilling to do it. Audrey nodded and said, yes, this means the loss of freedom of one's mind and thoughts. It's the most terrifying. Alger chuckled once more. How can there be a completely free mind and thoughts? By choosing your faith and beliefs, you're naturally bound by your faith and beliefs. Yes, let's focus only on the lone kingdom. The three churches are equal, and together with the royal family, this creates a balance between each other. If the Church of Storms goes overboard towards its believers, that believer can easily convert their faith to the Church of Evernight. Therefore, under most situations, the Orthodox churches will tend to use their standing and beliefs as a religion to guide important believers instead of using beyonder powers. Balance. Audrey pondered over this term. She came to a new realization of the kingdom's upper circles and the entire world. This was something she had come into contact with before, but had never deeply understood the word. At this moment, many of her thoughts matured. Thank you for your explanation, Mr. Hanged Man. Audrey sincerely addressed him with an honorary title. Then how should I deal with Vin Rambis? Alger calmly said, the problem with him isn't anything to panic about. You fully have the ability to run circles around him. You can provide him unimportant information while keeping the core secrets to heart. You can seek this opportunity to obtain potion formulas and even their beyonder ingredients. After some time, when there are corresponding changes, you can consider switching strategies. Of course, you can't be too careless. Duke Negan is an example of this mistake. Just as he said that, sitting at the bottom of the long mottled table, the World Gairman Sparrow glanced at Miss Justice. He said with a hoarse smile, when the time comes, even if Vin Rambis were to die, no one will suspect you. Even if Vin Rambis were to die. He's a demigod. Mr. World has plans of attacking Vin Rambis? It's possible. He has always been investigating Quarren's suicide case. He was even the one who informed me of Vin Rambis's true identity. Audrey's eyes widened slightly as she felt perturbed. Even when she hated and felt the most fear towards Vin Rambis, she had never had thoughts of killing the psychology alchemist's counselor. All she considered was the means to avoid being guided. On the one hand, it was because she didn't have such thoughts, and on the other hand, it was because he was a demigod. This meant the top-ranking power in the kingdom and churches. I understand what needs to be done. Thank you, all of you. Audrey drew a breath and politely thanked them. Klein sure sounds bombastic these days. Yes, he even wishes to get rid of Amon's avatars in Backlund. Vin Rambis is really nothing. Leonard looked at the World Gairman Sparrow with mixed feelings. Katlia and company also remained silent. With the topic of the psychology alchemists coming to an end, Klein controlled the World Gairman Sparrow to make him look towards himself. Honorable Mr. Fool, I wish to communicate privately with Mr. Star. Klein temporarily didn't wish to let the other members of the Tarot Club learn about the eradication of Amon's avatars. It wouldn't be good for keeping the matter confidential, and it might lead them to be targeted by Amon. Sure. The fool Klein naturally didn't deny his own request. As Leonard was feeling poignant at the possibility of private communication, he informed Klein of the main points in Palaz Zorost's reply. It also included the problem of the Worm of Time Beyonder characteristics loss. This made Klein suddenly realize how he could use his Worms of Spirit to create charms and bullets. Split off a few and kill them. When the characteristic contained in them return to my body, the remaining material can also be used like a Worm of Time. The only problem is that killing Worms of Spirit deals a certain level of damage to myself. After all, each Worm of Spirit contains a part of my spirit body. Yes, I have to limit the number each time. Only after I fully recover can I do it again. In thought, Klein got the World Gairman Sparrow to reply, I will try my best to confirm if a blessing of concealment is possible before I give you an answer. If there's no problem, we can attempt to seek out sealed artifacts of the Marauder pathway at the demigod level. Of course, I will try to think of the means to identify the grafting of fate. Klein wasn't sure if observation from above the gray fog would allow him to see the truth of fate, just like how he was able to see his believers being parasitized. Hence, he planned on using the paper crane to contact Snake of Mercury Willa Septon and gain his expert opinion. All right. As Leonard grumbled about how Old Man would have recovered further if demigod-level sealed artifacts at the Marauder pathway were that easy to find, he nodded slightly in response. Chapter 991, A Ritual Without a Reply. After ending the private communication, Klein made the World Gehrman Sparrow look at Katlia. Please inform Queen Mystic that I wish to meet her to talk about something. The exact time and location is up to her. Queen Mystic? So Ma'am Hermit represents the royals above the 5 seas. Leonard was first taken aback before he came to a realization. What's the matter? Katlia frowned slightly in a wary manner. I will forward her your intentions, but I cannot provide any guarantees over her agreement. Okay. The World Gehrman Sparrow nodded simply, indicating that it was fine. At this moment, Derek finally had an opportunity as he asked, Everyone, he glanced at Mr. Hanged Man and Mr. World before continuing. The ritual needed for me to advance to Priest of Light requires pure darkness. I need to bury my entire body in ice that usually doesn't melt. In the City of Silver, such ice isn't difficult to find. However, how do we create pure but safe darkness? So that's the Priest of Light's advancement ritual. Little Sun sure is honest and simple. Due to her lack of experience and knowledge, Audrey was unable to provide any substantial suggestions. All she could do was cast her eyes at the person she believed was capable of resolving the problem. The World Mr. Gehrman Sparrow. And at this moment, the World raised his hands to pinch his temples. As for the fool Klein, he was rapidly trying to think of a solution. Sigh, if this were the outside world, pure darkness is extremely easy to obtain. Ice that normally doesn't melt would be the most troublesome thing to obtain, but the City of Silver is the complete opposite. There, darkness is too dangerous. Just being within it will result in one's disappearance or suffering the attacks of strange monsters. I can get Leonard to provide charms from the Evernight domain, and then I can stir some of the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog. Using Little Sun's prayers, I can provide an area of artificial darkness. But the problem lies in me being unable to determine if this would bring the normal danger that the City of Silver encounters. This is not something that can be answered with divination. When matters do not involve myself, I can only determine if a matter is dangerous or not, or when matters should be done. And under such situations, there are too many elements involved, and the sources of danger are diverse. Yes, I'll summon a Rhodes later and ask it. Klein had previously been considering the problem over Little Sun's advancement, but he had never been able to find an answer. Seeing the world silent, Leonard, who had originally wanted to say that creating pure darkness is extremely easy, slowly shut his mouth. He began pondering over the sun's words and caught notice of a word that he had ignored. Safe. In the forsaken land of the gods, in the City of Silver, darkness is equivalent to danger. Leonard roughly grasped the key idea, but due to his lack of understanding, he was unable to provide any suggestions. Finally, it was Alger who spoke. He glanced at Derek and said, I will help you gather information and seek out solutions. But in the process, you might need to provide some help to confirm that it can be done. No problem. Derek answered without any hesitation. Right on the heels of that, he added, there's no need to rush it. I still have about a month before I can finish digesting my notary potion. Alger nodded gently, indicating that this wasn't something that needed any reminders. At this moment, Katlia deliberated for a moment and said to Derek, perhaps we can consider this problem from another angle. Your advancement ritual wouldn't last too long. We can simply increase the time you can survive in pure darkness to resolve this matter. I remember that you've mentioned that after being left in darkness with zero light, there are 2 dangers. The first would be the attacks from strange monsters that come from unknown origins, and the second would be a baffling instance of disappearance that is akin to evaporating. The former situation is easy to resolve. You can make a request to your chief for certain sealed artifacts, or you can get him to stand guard by your side. As for the second case, I don't know enough. You can attempt to ask your chief. Derek thought about it carefully and suddenly felt that this was a viable train of thought with a rather significant chance of success. He immediately replied in pleasant surprise, Thank you, Ma'am Hermit. The exchange and learning session continued until the gathering slowly came to an end. Seeing that it was almost done, The fool Klein rapped gently on the table's corner. Let's end it here for today. Your wish is our will. Audrey and company stood up and bowed reverently. After they vanished from above the gray fog, Klein left the area and returned to the real world. He first took out his wallet and got the paper crane which was folded by Willa Septon. Spreading it across the table, he picked up a pencil and simply wrote, "There's something." After folding the paper crane and stuffing it under his pillow, Klein got into bed and genuinely took an afternoon nap. In his hazy dream, he once again saw the pitch-black plains and the towering steeple. Passing through the plains and through the wooden doors, Klein arrived at the familiar corner. A black pram came out of the thick shadows as Willa Septon, wrapped in silver silk, sucked at his right thumb and derided angrily. "You are getting more and more impolite." Klein laughed dryly and said, "With our relationship, there's no need for such pleasantries, right?" Willa Septon harumphed and said, "Speak, what's the matter?" "This is the thing. I recently encountered Amon's avatar," Klein said directly. The baby's mouth widened a little as though he was about to cry. It took him great effort to control himself as he said, "I haven't been born for more than a month. There's nothing I need from you. I only wish to ask you a question," Klein quickly added. Willa Septon raised his fleshy arm and waved it. "What is it?" Klein immediately said with a smile, "Amon's avatar can steal the destiny of others and appear while replacing their identities. I wish to know how I can see through such a terrifying matter." Willa Septon chuckled as he pointed up at the sky with his index finger. "Pray for help." From the looks of it, using the powers of the gray fog can be used to discover the grafting of destiny. Klein heaved a sigh of relief as he felt even more certain. When he thought of the word using, he was referring to using his marionette to pray to the fool while he entered above the gray fog. Through the point of light representing his believer, he could survey the surrounding area to seek out any abnormalities. In a sense, this was equivalent to the fool's observation, an equivalent to an augmented, true vision. But the problem is that I can't stay above the gray fog to observe for grafting all the time. It might be the case that, in between two of the observation periods, Amon could have entered Buckland Street and have done something. Klein thought before asking with some deliberation, "Anything you would like to remind me of?" Willa Septon turned his head away without looking at him as he mumbled, "You have to visit me and my parents once this week. During high tea." "No problem," Klein agreed without any hesitation. Only then did the baby turn his head back and giggle. "Next week, around Wednesday or Thursday, there might be some changes in your destiny." "Is that so?" Klein nodded in thought as he watched the black pram slowly retreat into the shadows. After waking up from his dream, he packed up his items and began setting up an altar without any rest. This time, the target of his prayer was the Evernight goddess herself, and not artificial death. This was to prevent Amon from prying upon the source of the stirring via the changes in destiny and, thus, noticing something wrong. How could the Evernights blessed be praying to artificial death? After setting up the ritual, Klein wiped his face and turned into the cold-looking German sparrow, causing his height to drop a little lower. After igniting the first two candles in front, Klein made the ordinary candle representing himself burn with a yellow flame. There were two candles in front. One was a candle made of night vanilla and slumber flower to represent Evernight, and the other was a candle made up of white chestnut flowers and wild rose to represent concealment. Following that, he created a wall of spirituality, dripped full moon essential oil, and burned some herbal powder that pleased the goddess. Bit by bit, he completed the ritual. Towards the end, Klein took 2 steps back, activated his spirit vision, and chanted softly, "I pray for the power of the dark night. I pray for the power of the mystery. I pray for the goddess's loving grace." I encountered blasphemer Amon's avatar in Backland. He was gathering the characteristics of a marauder pathway demigod. I seek for the blessings of concealment so as to complete the mission of eradicating the blasphemer's avatars. Night vanilla, a herb that belongs to the red moon. Please pass my supplication to the goddess. Moonflower, a herb that belongs to the red moon. Please pass my supplication to the goddess. After he was done chanting, Klein patiently waited for a while, but nothing happened. There wasn't any reply. The goddess is in a critical period of gaining control over the death pathway's uniqueness and is unable to respond beyond anything normal? Should I try to pray to artificial death? After all, if there are the blessings of concealment, Amon wouldn't be able to see it. If it doesn't, then the source of stirring destiny wouldn't point to me. Klein frowned little by little as he ended the ritual and cleared the altar. He felt that he needed to find other solutions. After he finished clearing the desk and turned around, prepared to head for the reclining chair, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. The figure wore a simple linen robe with signs of patching. By the figure's waist was a belt made of tree bark. Raven black hair cascaded down freely as the figure's feet didn't wear any socks or shoes, making them covered in dust and wounds. It was a lady. She had extremely normal facial features. Her ghostly black eyes were no different from the common person, but just looking at her left Klein feeling a sense of extreme peace and serenity. Even though feelings of alarm rose up within him, they were unable to overpower the peacefulness. Chapter 992 Erodes's Congratulations. You are? Klein asked in a rather complicated state of calmness. The lady in a simple robe nodded and said, Ariana, servant of concealment. Servant of concealment. Ariana. Klein's eyes constricted, as he knew who the lady was. As a former Nighthawk, how could he not be aware of the name Ariana? She was the Evernight Cloister's matron, head of the 13 archbishops, a likely candidate for the future pope. Regardless of which identity she had, she was part of the general knowledge that couldn't be avoided in religious studies and mysticism. As for the name, Servant of Concealment, Klein had read about it in Emperor Rosel's diary. Considering the similar name of Attendant of Mysteries, he suspected that this pointed to an angel. Meanwhile, based on the law of Beyonder characteristics conservation, with a sequence O in existence, it meant that Attendant of Mysteries couldn't be a sequence 1 angel. Therefore, Klein believed that the Servant of Concealment was likely sequence 2 of the Evernight pathway. It isn't that the goddess didn't reply, but that she used a very special way to respond. She directly sent her servant over. Klein felt mixed emotions that could hardly be described. He fell silent for a few seconds before giving a solemn bow. Good afternoon, Your Eminence. In the various churches, if a demigod at the angel level walked the land, there was a need to address them as Your Eminence as a show of respect. Likewise, towards the pontiff, pope, and chief shepherd representatives of the deities, one had to use Your Holiness. In addition, a church's head was synonymous with the Holy See or Apostolic See. Of course, many a time, the Holy See could also represent the church's headquarters itself. Ariana tapped her chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion and replied in a pious manner, May the goddess bless you. She then said, I'm an ascetic. You can just call me ma'am. Yes, ma'am Ariana. Klein didn't insist. Ariana looked at him calmly for 2 seconds and directly asked, You plan to deal with blasphemer Amon's avatars in Backland? Yes, I wish to obtain the blessings of concealment, Klein frankly replied. At this moment, he felt a little stumped because this was different from what he expected. He originally expected the goddess to answer by blessing him. Then, he and Palez Zoroast could join forces to wipe out all of Amon's avatars in Backland. During this process, it wouldn't expose Leonard or the Marauder Pathway Angel. But now, with the blessings becoming something corporeal that would be involved in the battle, Palez Zoroast would immediately be discovered once he took action. When that happened, it was hard to predict what would ensue. Don't tell me I don't need to ally with Palez Zoroast? I'll only get him to provide intel and then split some of the spoils of war. Klein's thoughts rapidly ran through his mind as Ariana spoke unhurriedly. I can provide the power of concealment to shield everything that happens from the prying of fate. However, I cannot guarantee that I can eliminate all of Amon's avatars in Backland. Palez Zoroast said that he has the means of doing so. The person who understands Amon the best is indeed a sequence 1 of the same pathway. Klein thought and said, Ma'am Ariana, I have already come up with a well-thought-out plan. All you need is to provide the power of concealment. You do not need to be involved in the actual battle. Leave the rest to me. Ariana nodded and raised her right arm as she spread her palm. Points of light lit up, profound and resplendent as they quickly outlined an emblem in her palm. This emblem was completely crystallized, as though it was made of obsidian. It made one realize its existence when looking at it, but it appeared to vanish when not looking at it. This is my Evernight coat of arms. It doesn't possess any characteristics or power by itself. The only use is that, when triggered, it will establish a connection with me, regardless of where you are in the real world, Ariana explained simply. Before you begin your operation, Remember to use it. I will provide you with the power of concealment. If you need more direct assistance, use ancient Hermes to chant Ariana when triggering it. This is equivalent to an itemized altar and ritual that points to her. Oh, at the level of angel, the range of responding to prayers has extended to the entire world? Klein instantly grasped the true nature of the Evernight coat of arms. As a bizarro sorcerer, he did not have the means to reply to prayers. This was a trait that could be obtained only at sequence 3. Of course, as Sea God and the Fool, he was very well versed in such matters. Klein didn't stand on ceremony as he accepted it and bowed sincerely. Thank you. After saying that, he tapped 4 spots in a clockwise manner on his chest, forming the sign of the Crimson Moon. Praise the Lady. This way, he could still join forces with Palez Zoroast. As long as he triggered the Evernight coat of arms without using ancient Hermes to chant Ariana's name, everything would be fine. Praise the Lady, Ariana replied piously. Her figure then vanished as though she had been erased by an eraser. This is a departure by entering a concealed state? Klein pursed his lips in thought. Meanwhile, he was filled with suspicion over Ariana's swift arrival. After all, the Evernight pathway wasn't well versed in methods such as teleport. To go from Winter County all the way to Backland required a significant amount of time. My ritual isn't the kind that prays for a direct descent. Could it be that Ma'am Ariana happened to be in the vicinity, in the Backland diocese? Isn't that too much a coincidence? If it isn't one, it only serves to exacerbate the problem. What is she doing in Backland? The undercurrents are stirring. Klein retracted his gaze and patiently waited a while before turning back into Dwayne Dantes. He found a pen and some paper once again, and drew the symbol that was a mixture of concealment and mystery prying. When the final stroke was written, the full-body mirror in the master bedroom produced a dark but pure light, as though a silent undercurrent was surging out from the bottom of a lake. Right on the heels of that, fireworks appeared, bursting in the sky. Colors of gold, silver, red, and blue exploded as words formed in the mirror. Welcome back, Great Master. Your humble servant, Rhodes, has witnessed the retrieval of a portion of your authority. I'm thrilled that you are gradually recovering your aura. You will eventually return to your supreme position and make the entire world turn silent under your watch. This is really passionate. There's always something new. Klein nodded in silence. Amidst the fireworks, those words dissipated and formed into a new sentence. Great Master, what instructions do you have for me? I have a question, Klein said calmly. In a place where being in darkness can result in danger, how should one create a safe but pure darkness? There are 2 kinds of dangers involved. 1, it will make a person directly vanish in the darkness, and 2, it will cause strange monsters to appear and attack. The fireworks in the full-body mirror calmed down as aqueous light rippled. Silver words surfaced one after another. Great Master, are you referring to the forsaken land of the gods? This magic mirror actually knows quite a lot. He also gave me a free question in passing. Klein nodded and said, That's right. Without any breaks in between, Rhodes's full-body mirror produced new lines of Loanese text. The formation of the forsaken land of the gods is related to the second creator's fall. The danger of night there stems from the transformation of 2 essential powers. First, it's the remnants of the Evernight goddess's divine powers. Second, it's the influence left behind by the creator. He wielded partial authority over shadows, darkness, fallen, corruption, and mutation. The former makes creatures vanish into thin air, while the latter produced monsters in the darkness. So the 2 types of danger stem from different powers. It's no wonder that there's such huge differences. Rhodes called the ancient sun god the second creator. This is very close to my theory. Amon's and Adam's father isn't the reawakening of the original creator, but a transmigrator who inherited a huge inheritance? Klein asked in thought. In that case, the Evernight goddess was involved in the fall of the second creator? This was something Klein had vaguely expected. This was from the trait of humans evaporating in the darkness of the forsaken land of the gods. It was very similar to the strange disappearances if one didn't sleep at night in the ruins of the Battle of the Gods. And based on Little Sun's description, king of demonic wolves, Phlegria, who wielded control over the Evernight and concealment authorities, had long perished in the second epoch. It was impossible that he had done it. Therefore, unless there was another deity of the Evernight pathway born in the middle, It was difficult for the two abnormalities to not have the Evernight goddess involved. On the surface of the mirror, the silver light rapidly converged, forming a short sentence. That's right. That's right. Klein was just about to press on when he immediately shut up. He had just recalled one of his identities, blessed of the Evernight. Therefore, even without anyone watching him, he had to show respect to the deity and not seek out relevant secrets. Of course, time in the mysterious space above the gray fog was excluded. He was just about to focus on the main question from before to urge Rhodes to list out solutions when he saw the silver words in the full-body mirror change. Great Master, your loyal servant, Rhodes, wishes a small favor from you. See, can we not discuss matters regarding the Evernight goddess? At the end of the question, a simple stick figure was drawn. Just as I wished. Klein deliberately pondered for 2 seconds and said, Okay. The silver swirls on the surface of the mirror immediately turned brisk as words began taking form. As for the question you asked, there are 2 solutions. One is to accept the corruption and let oneself transform into monsters of the darkness. The reason why these creatures do not vanish into thin air during the night is because they have received the protection of the fallen authority. This way, all the darkness is equivalent to safety. The second is to create a darkness that comes with the dream world. This will allow the spirit body to receive the protection of the dream, thus slowing down the encroachment of danger at night. Chapter 993. Another possibility allowing the spirit body to receive protection of a dream to slow down the encroachment of danger at night. This is similar to the necessity to sleep when night fell in the ruins of the battlefield of the gods. Also, the powers in the forsaken land of the gods likely isn't under the goddess's control. Once one vanishes in the darkness over there, they definitely won't enter the foggy town. Where will it point towards? Or would they stay in the same spot, unable to interact with companions and the real world until they die of starvation or old age? After reading Rhodes's reply, Klein was somewhat enlightened as he roughly grasped the crux of the issue. However, he felt that this wasn't necessarily useful, because the sun only required pure darkness so that he could be buried in ice that normally wouldn't melt to consume the Priest of Light potion. Once he entered a dream, there was no way for him to control his own body to complete that critical step. That way, even if he could remain in the darkness for prolonged periods of time, it would be meaningless. Yes, I'll wait until Little Sun asks the chief of the City of Silver before coming up with an actual plan based on his answer. Of course, before that, I can try to get a corresponding solution from Leonard to figure out how to create darkness with a temporary dream world. Klein nodded slightly, acknowledging the answer provided by the magic mirror. As for the first option of accepting corruption and turning into a monster in the darkness, it wasn't even considered. In the extraordinary world, this was equivalent to committing suicide, which almost couldn't be reversed. Upon considering how he still had one question left to ask, Klein deliberated and asked, Where can I obtain the potion formula of the Seer Pathways Sequence 3, Scholar of Yore? The full-body mirror's surface had aqueous light ripple once again as it reflected a dark cathedral without any natural light. Klein found this scene very familiar as he immediately recalled what it represented. This was where Zeratul, who had turned into a monster, hid. However, this time, deep inside the cathedral, the cluster of blurry and huge maggots were no longer present. Just as Klein's pupils dilated, the silver words appeared beneath the scene depiction. Great Master, Zeratul has vanished. I can't find him. Vanished. Klein momentarily forgot to breathe. Although he had long known of Zeratul's return, since he was the one who began the chain reaction by opening the door to the foggy town, he never expected this big shot to secretly leave the cathedral, his whereabouts becoming unknown. Even Rhodes is unable to locate him. What is he plotting? The more Klein thought, the more a chill ran down his back. Having become a Sequence 4 demigod, he could confirm one thing. His control over the mysterious world above the gray fog was still insufficient. He could temporarily only converge the leaking specialness that it had augmented him with in the real world, making it difficult for Beyonders of corresponding pathways to see it, but it was unable to repress the law of Beyonder characteristic convergence. As for the gray fog, it had proven time and time again that he had an invisible form of attraction towards Beyonders of the Seer, Apprentice, and Marauder pathway. Amongst them, the effects on the Seer pathway was most evident. Besides, I myself am quite an attractive Sequence 4 Bizarro sorcerer. It's not impossible for Zeratul to suddenly come to Backlund one day. Klein maintained a deadpan expression and said to the full-body mirror that was switching scenes, Got it. Antigonus presented another scene which Klein was equally familiar with. It was the Antigonus family's treasure trove at the peak of the Hornacis mountain range. Below this scene, silver words quickly surfaced once again. Great Master, there's another possibility, but I can't tell. I just know that it's easier than the first two. The Antigonus family's notebook isn't there this time? That's right. It will lead the wielder to the main peak of the Hornacis mountain range to seek out the Antigonus family's treasure trove. It's basically the same as the previous option. What's the possibility that even a Rhodes can't tell? Based on what I know about the factions in control of the seer pathway, it's implying that I should pray to the goddess for it? The goddess is the mother of concealment, so she can choose whether a Rhodes can see it or not. Klein's thoughts scattered and quickly made a connection. Of course, he didn't believe that directly praying for the scholar of your potion formula would allow him to get it. It was too ridiculous, as though it was child's play. From his experience as a Nighthawk, he suspected that he might need to make enough contributions before he could obtain the scholar of your potion formula from the Evernight goddess via a ritual. Making enough contributions. This sure is a familiar phrase. Klein sighed as he began having some ideas. Clearly, he had hints on how to do so handle the artificial death faction of the numinous episcopate. However, Klein suspected that the goddess only had up to the scholar of your sequence for the seer pathway potion formulas, and not the subsequent ones at the angel level. This was because the Antigonus family's angel didn't perish immediately back then but had hidden in a secret palace, losing control to become a monster and was in a half-sealed state. In addition, the Fool card was also there and hadn't been retrieved yet. At this moment, Klein had the intention of asking about Amon's avatars, but he suddenly recalled that within the memories of the rat demigod, the warning about the Marauder Pathway Angel and Amon had been given by this very mirror. As his thoughts flashed through his mind, Klein narrowed his eyes, looked at the full-body mirror, and nodded. All right, that's it for today. Head back. If there's anything in the future, I'll summon you again. Yes, Master. Goodbye, Master. Your loyal and humble servant, a Rhodes, is constantly waiting to return to your side. Light gathered on the mirror's surface, depicting a stick figure waving its hand. After everything returned to normal, Klein turned around and picked up the paper with the previously drawn symbol. With a snap of his fingers, he made it burst into scarlet flames. The ash floated down as he spread open his left hand. In it were two maggots shimmering with solid mysterious symbols. The two maggots squirmed gently, using their life force to fill the entire bedroom with madness and bizarreness. The surrounding lights then dimmed and brightened from time to time in a non-uniform fashion. They were none other than the worms of spirit which Klein had separated from himself. Suddenly, Klein reached out his right palm, suddenly pressing them towards the two transparent maggots. Instantly, his palm paused, just short of touching the worms of spirit. He raised his palm again, lowering it only to pause. He repeated this several times until he finally exerted his strength with a deadpan expression. Amidst an invisible and illusory cracking sound, his head suddenly felt a stabbing pain. This made his soul feel like it was being ripped apart. It was even more painful than encountering a gunshot or a slash wound. Klein used his clown powers to control the twitching of his facial muscles. After a few seconds, he raised his right hand to rub his temples, inwardly mumbling, "Indeed, the death of every worm of spirit deals damage to the spirit body. My current limit is 6. I'll temporarily stop trying. Let's see how long it takes to recover. Thankfully, this is a tolerable matter. Otherwise, it would be dangerous if a marionette is destroyed while the worm of spirit isn't able to be collected in time due to an intense battle. Yes, it's different from Amon's worms of time avatars. A Bizarro sorcerer's worms of spirit will not necessarily die when a marionette is destroyed. Most of the time, a Bizarro sorcerer is able to retrieve them in time. It's because the distance between the body and the marionette isn't that exaggerated. After confirming the situation, and waiting for the Beyonder characteristics contained within the worms of spirit to return to himself, Klein rummaged for some materials and set up a ritual to pray to the Fool. After a series of tasks, Klein used the carcasses of 2 worms of spirit, 2 silver plates, and the complicated symbol which he had previously recorded down to make 2 silver black bullets, of which the latter came from Snake of Mercury Willow Septon. The 2 bullets were carved with strange, indescribable patterns. They kept extending inwards as though they were coming together in the middle at one point. Their entire bodies were gloomy but not dark. Just one look at it made one's thoughts sluggish. Klein flicked a gold coin and used divination, together with his spiritual intuition, to swiftly determine the abilities of the two bullets. The target would immediately enter a state of paralysis upon being hit. The length of time that one was left in this state depended on the potency of one's spirit body. Even Sequence 3 Saints would be in a state of stiffness for a second or two. This already exceeds my powers. Of course, the premise is that contact can be made. Oh, this is a result of the Grey Fog's augmentation. These two bullets should be at the same level as the Fate Siphon charms. Although my Worms of Spirit can't be compared to Amon's and Pala's Worms of Time, the amount of power I can now draw from the mysterious space above the Grey Fog is clearly superior to what I could do in the past. I shall call them Control Spirit Bullets. Klein drew Death Knell from his underarm holster, snapped open the cylinder wheel, and stuffed the two silver-black Control Spirit Bullets inside. Following that, he spread open a piece of paper beside the altar and wrote, "Next, your mission is to seek out relatively high-level charms and Beyonder bullets. May God be with you. XXX who raised 3 requests from you." This letter was written to Patrick Bryan of the Numinous Episcopate's Artificial Death faction. With a subordinate at my disposal, why let him go to waste? As Klein mumbled, he folded his letter. At the altar from before, he summoned Patrick Bryan's messenger. The surface of the desk burst into pitch-black flames and quickly gathered together, forming a translucent bird with dark feathers. This spirit world creature glanced at Klein before slowly lowering its head to bite at the envelope. Watching it disappear, Klein nodded slightly and inwardly muttered, "Patrick's contract companion isn't of a low level either." He quickly reined in his thoughts, took out another letter and fluidly wrote, "I have already obtained the blessing of concealment. You can attempt to gather items at the Marauder Pathway demigod level. In addition, I've found a way to crack the theft and replacement of destiny. You don't have to be too anxious. Do you know how to create a darkness that includes a temporary dream world? If you have the time, can you head to Tingen and help me use 3-0782 to create flaring sun bullets? The mutated sun's sacred emblem has the divine blood of the eternal blazing sun hidden in it. Only by sufficiently raising your strength can we be more confident at dealing with Amon's avatars." Chapter 994 Prelude at 7 Pinster Street. Leonard, who had specially returned home to participate in the tarot gathering, was just about to head to St. Samuel Cathedral's basement to read the dossiers so as to make preparations for his placating of souls at night when his vision suddenly went into a blur. He saw the messenger in a dark, full dress holding 4 blonde red-eyed heads. As a soul assurer, he could already see such creatures with spirit bodies. After taking Klein's letter, Leonard didn't even have the chance to say thank you when Rionette Tynker turned around and walked into the void. She didn't even stay for long. "Old man, why does Klein have a messenger of this level? Is this a perk of being a blessed?" Leonard couldn't help but ask Palaz Zoroast with a suppressed voice. He originally fantasized that it was standard for every tarot club member, but he later realized that he had been imagining things. Palaz Zoroast's slightly aged voice chuckled immediately. "It is likely to solely belong to Klein Moretti. Everyone receives some special fortuitous encounter. Isn't that the case? Isn't it the same even for a fellow like you? Haha, I thought you would use incomplete angel to describe her, but you ended up using messenger of this level. Not bad. You still remember my warning." Leonard curled the corners of his lips, spread open the piece of paper, and read the content on it. "He's indeed the blessed of concealment and fate." Palaz Zoroast quickly scanned the heading through Leonard's eyes. Leonard didn't look at the ground. Instead, he took a few steps back and threw himself into the embrace of the sofa before saying, "Klein can see through the theft and replacement of destiny. Then, we don't need to rush to seek out items at the Marauder Pathway demigod level. Even if you were in a hurry, you have no idea where to seek them out," Palaz scoffed. "Even for the gathering of the Hermits of Fate, similar items needed years to appear even once. And the next gathering was to happen at the end of the year." Leonard was momentarily at a loss for words and could only cast his gaze at the last 2 paragraphs. After a brief silence he chuckled. "I've always been curious as to where Klein received the high-level charm of the Sun Domain when facing Megos. I thought it was provided to him by that Death Consul, but I couldn't understand why a Death Domain angel would be gathering high-level charms of the Sun Domain. Wouldn't that be suicide? Now, I finally understand. Old man, I wielded 3-0782 before as well. Why didn't you notice that there was a drop of the eternal blazing sun's divine blood hidden in that? If you could have stolen some of its power back then, things wouldn't have. Leonard originally wanted to mock Old Man, but as he went on, he fell silent. Pallas Zoroast sighed in his mind. If that drop of divine blood could be so easily discovered, that mutated sun's sacred emblem wouldn't have been in Tinjin. Leonard fell silent for a few seconds before asking, then how am I to create an opportunity to get that sacred emblem to create the flaring sun charm? Although Klein made it sound simple in his letter, Leonard knew that it wasn't an easy task. This was because he wasn't a Nighthawk of Tinjin City. Even if he returned to visit his former colleagues and teammates, he had no authority to enter Cheney's gate. Upon hearing his question, Pallas Zoroast replied in a peeved manner, "Why are you asking me something as trivial as this? Can't you think for yourself?" Leonard coughed uncomfortably as he began thinking seriously to seek out a solution. "I'm currently working alone, but the Archbishop has given me the authority to get the help of the local Nighthawks in the region of question. If all the souls in Backland have been placated, and if I haven't finished digesting my potion, wouldn't I have to do it at other dioceses? When that happens, if Tinjin happens to have a paranormal accident, it will be very reasonable for me to return and get 2 Nighthawks and use 3-0782. After Leonard finished muttering to himself, Pallas Zoroast chuckled. "Not bad. You came up with an idea so quickly. But have you thought about it? You are placating them, not purifying them. This is contradictory with obtaining 3-0782. It will easily incur suspicion." Leonard, who had been praised, immediately laughed. "Old man, that's because you aren't aware. Back when I joined the Nighthawks team, there was one line in the education I received. Only under the premise of having the ability to purify can placating achieve the best results. Emperor Roselle had also once said that to solve problems, you need a stick in one hand and a carrot in the other." Pallas Zoroast immediately sked. "Then follow your plan. Of course, that's assuming that you can finish Anthony Stevenson's missions in a week or 2. If you haven't obtained the sun flare bullets before the actual operation of eliminating Amon begins, then it would no longer be necessary." Leonard recalled the list of missions written on the pieces of paper as his forehead twitched. He then forced himself to forget about his worries and mumbled, "I wonder when the mission to punish the Sanguine will begin. I wonder if the Sanguine has a sealed artifact at the Marauder Pathways demigod level. Temporary dream world. I can create it myself. I'll find a chance to make some charms, but can power at this level be able to resist the corrosion of the darkness in the forsaken land of the gods?" In an apartment in Sherwood Borough, Furs took out a novel, sat on the sofa, and watched Zio walk towards the lobby as she wore her boots to head out. Finally, Furs couldn't hold back her puzzlement as she said, "There's no rush. That gentleman said that he wouldn't assign the mission that quickly." Zio shot her a glance and said, "I'm a bounty hunter. I have other missions." Upon saying that, she paused and said after some deliberation, "Furs, do you think that Miss Justice resembles Miss Audrey?" Furs was taken aback for a few seconds before she snapped back to senses. She subconsciously waved her hand and chuckled. How was that possible? Just as she said that, the similarities began flashing through her mind, her eyes widening in response. After a while she whispered, "It's not impossible. Spectator pathway, psychology alchemists, noble lady, blonde hair and green eyes. She's the only noble I know that meets those criteria. Of course, I don't know that many nobles. Furthermore, I have no idea if the ones I'm familiar with have anything to do with the psychology alchemists." Zio silently listened to her friend and said after some thought, "Furs, do you still remember the missions assigned to us by Miss Audrey? I originally thought that it was issued by Earl Hall, but on second thought, perhaps it came from the tarot gathering. Also, how did we know of Mr. Fool's honorific name? Do you remember? It was from books we borrowed from Viscount Glaint. In the book cover was a strange ancient slip." Furs nodded in enlightenment. "If we could discover it, as a good friend of Viscount Glaint, Miss Audrey has a chance of discovering it as well. This can explain why she joined the gathering." "Yeah," Zio agreed with Furs's guess. Furs opened her mouth and was just about to say something when she recalled that the matter with the Sanguine wasn't completely over. She immediately looked around warily and said, "Zio, we should lessen our discussions of gatherings in the future. As for Miss Audrey, we can visit her once every week or 2. We can continue observing when the time comes." Xiao snapped to her senses and nodded heavily. All right. She then opened her door and went to a particular bar in East Borough and sat by the bar counter. Rapping on the table, she said to the bartender who looked up, "Any new missions today?" The bartender gave a rough list without mentioning any investigations of a particular Mr. Ernst Boyar. Indeed, I'll have to wait till tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Xiao looked around, retracted her gaze, and asked in puzzlement and concern, I haven't seen Sherman in a while. Do you know where he's been? Sherman was a young man who thought himself as a woman one of Xiao's informants. The bartender chuckled. Perhaps he ran off with some man. You do know that he's happy to do so if a man fancies him. This isn't something worth ostracizing him about, Xiao rebutted seriously, feeling a baffling sense of concern. She then exerted strength in her palm and jumped off the high stool, prepared to seek out Sherman in the places he was usually seen. Backland Bridge area, Iron Gate Street, Braveheart's Bar. Holding down his hat, Emlyn pinched his nose as he passed through the crowd that exuded all kinds of smells before finding the red-eyed Ian in the card room. Mr. White, what is it this time? Ian smiled as he led Emlyn into an empty billiard room. Emlyn took off his hat and quipped, something trivial. Help me put up a mission to the bounty hunters. The details of the mission is to track a man named Ernst Boyar. Figure out his daily activities. The bounty reward will be £100. £100? Ian subconsciously asked. For investigations like tracking, £100 was quite a ridiculous reward. One had to know that if a bounty hunter was able to complete this mission on their own, they could rest for an entire year, even if they were supporting a family. Emlyn nodded. The target is rather dangerous. After the discussion back with the Tarot Club, he had already thought it through. He believed that tracking Ernst Boyar was an easy mission. The sanguine Viscount would definitely pretend as though he didn't notice anything and deliberately follow a fixed trajectory. Therefore, this £100 was in fact payment for misjudgment to take the risk of participating in this operation. Of course, to aid in the misdirection and concealment, it was almost certain that more than one bounty hunter would complete this mission, allowing them to earn different portions of the reward. All Emlyn could guarantee was that misjudgment would earn the most. I see. Coming to an understanding, Ian extended his hand. Down payment, exact address, level of danger, looks and characteristics. It's best if you have a portrait. Ernst Boyar then gave £30 in cash and Ernst Boyar's portrait. Red eyes. Ian flipped through the pieces of paper in his hand and couldn't help but blurt out. Yes. Emlyn nodded gently and looked around him. He suppressed his voice and said, There's also something else. Help me seek out clues regarding the Rose School of Thought members in Backland. Rose School of Thought? Ian was taken aback as he asked in puzzlement, as though he had never heard of the name. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.